Chapter 297. Jiang Wang was not sure about the other places, but at least in Jia City, Manager Qian's escape had only spread to a small area. The Four Seas Business Alliance's work here was still ongoing. They mainly relied on the warehouses that they built when they first moved in. Outside of Qingyang town, the so-called work was nothing more than the people in charge of the warehouses thinking of how to sell these resources for a high price without letting too many people starve to death. Even if they were weak, the Yang country still had a bottom line of not letting their people starve to death. Manager Qian had taken away all the money that could be taken away, leaving only large amounts of resources in the warehouses. Ironically, the new Jia City mayor was still hesitating and did not take over the resources. After all, the other party was Qi's Four Seas Business Alliance. Like many of the Yang country's officials, he still had fantasies about Qi. After all, he had been a dog for so many years, and many times he had already seen himself as the master. The new Jia City mayor was named Shi Jing. He was over 50 years old and had wasted many years. The reason why he was able to pick up the position of Jia City mayor was because of another layer of relationship. He was the adopted son of the Rizhao prefectural governor's fourth concubine. Who knew how they were connected? Anyways, he became the adopted son of the Rizhao prefectural governor. With such a relative relationship, he was able to take up the position. In the current chaos of the Yang country, no one cared about such things. At least in Jia City, resources were not lacking. At the start of the disaster, the Four Seas Business Alliance used their strong mobilization ability to gather large amounts of resources and store them in various places. In Qingyang town, the bald guard Qinyong and the others left, leaving behind the warehouses that supported the tens of thousands of people. 7th month, 27th day, under Manager Qian's operation, more and more resources were sent to Qingyang town. 7th month, 28th day. The new Jia City mayor seemed to have just woken up from a dream. He stopped the flow of resources and took over all the resources in the name of the mayor's manor. As for the people of the Four Seas Business Alliance, apart from the ones that ran away, the rest were all captured and interrogated. However, to Jiang Wang, it did not matter. The warehouses of Qingyang town were already filled to the brim. It was enough for the people of Qingyang town for at least 3 months. No matter what the Qi army's commander was thinking, the war could not drag on until November. On the 29th of July, the news that Qi's army was trapped in China had spread. In the official letter of credence, Qi's intention was still to help Yang country seal off the mutated plague and protect the safety of the eastern region. Other than not allowing anyone to enter or leave, they did not seem to have any battle plans at all. Of course, it also gave the Yang kingdom enough time to organize their army. The confidence shown by this was especially despairing. The Yang people knew very well that they didn't have a truly powerful army. Let's not talk about the last strong army that the previous monarch had sacrificed. In the past few years, they have followed the Qi army to fight and lost their men and blood in the previous wars. In the end, what they got back were not well-trained soldiers, but large amounts of wealth from the Qi army. The Yang kingdom seemed to be getting richer and richer, but their military prowess was declining. This was a form of boiling a frog in warm water. Unfortunately, it was only now that the army had locked up the country that many people realized this point. Yang Jinda was very clear about this, but because he could see through it, he couldn't refuse. The only result of refusing would be to hasten the process of the country's destruction. That was why he slowly handed over his power and focused on cultivation. On one hand, he had no hope in the country, so he placed his hopes on his own strength. On the other hand, it was also a form of escape. It was also because the Yang kingdom was so weak that after Yang Jinda killed the crown prince, he didn't immediately gather the army to fight to the death with the Qi army. Instead, he begged to surrender and didn't hesitate to gamble the king's face to lure Zhongshuan and Chuyang to Zhaoheng City to kill them. If he could kill Xiong too, it would undoubtedly boost the morale of the entire Yang kingdom. Yang Jinda himself could also buy some time to move around. He could ask for support, get allies, or create conflicts within the Qi army. In short, this was the only way he could think of to break the current situation. However, Chongxian Chu Yang didn't care at all. He just sat in the commander's tent and didn't move. He didn't seem as brave as he used to be, but it made people feel even more despair. Let's not talk about the bigger picture. Just take Rizhao Prefecture, for example. When the people of the Yang Kingdom were in a state of panic, the Rizhao Prefecture governor, the old Song Guang, made another move. He actually forced the cities under his rule to not keep more than 7 days' worth of rations and hand it over to the prefecture government. He used this method to control the rations to stabilize the people of the prefecture. He also demanded a large amount of money, saying that it was to raise the army and protect the land. However, because it didn't go through the Yang court, it didn't have an official name. They only called it saving the country. This series of actions wasn't just dazzling, it was simply blinding and deafening. Just in terms of controlling the rations, using the name of the prefecture government to control the various cities was on a completely different level from using the name of the prefecture government to control the entire prefecture. It was giving up on the easy to find the difficult, wasting manpower. Song Guang wasn't stupid. To be able to become the governor of a prefecture, how could Song Guang be a fool? Although many of the decisions he made during this period of time, when the Yang Kingdom was in a state of chaos, seemed stupid. However, this kind of stupidity was relative to the Yang Kingdom. To him, it was a wise decision. If the Yang Kingdom could rise again, he would have stabilized the situation. If the Yang Kingdom didn't have a tomorrow, he would have more resources. To put it bluntly, he could sell them for a good price. However, in Jiang Wang's position, he didn't feel so comfortable, because the official document from the Jia City mayor had already been sent to Qingyang town. Of course, Jiang Wang ignored it and tore it to pieces on the spot. He wasn't rich and couldn't satisfy the greed of the Rizhao County governor. As for the rations in Qingyang town, those were the lives of the 30,000 people in the town. He couldn't let them go. However, what he didn't expect was, just 1 day later, the new Jia City mayor, Shi Jing, actually mobilized the city guards to attack Qingyang town. Outside Qingyang town, the army was in formation. The generals hadn't even drawn their swords, but their murderous intent was already in the air. Jia City's city guards had 10,000 people. The Shi family had all left the Yang Kingdom. Some of the high-ranking generals left, but the army couldn't take them away. They lost some talents, but the general structure was still there. No matter how much Shi Jing relied on his connections to get to his position, he knew the importance of military power. Therefore, the first thing he did after taking office was to take control of the army. His godfather, Song Guang, gave the order, and he was the most active of all the mayors. However, the entire Jia City had been hit hard by the plague. After the Shi family's departure and the Four Seas Business Alliance's harvest, the city wasn't rich anymore. He led the army to Qingyang town for 2 reasons. First, he wanted to kill the monkey to warn the chicken and establish the new mayor's authority. Second, he received accurate news that Manager Qian of the Four Seas Business Alliance had stolen a large amount of money and was hiding in Qingyang town. Of course, he knew about Jiang Wang killing Shi Munin. To be safe, he brought 5,000 city guards with him this time. All of them were elites. Other than the garrison troops that needed to maintain order in the city, almost all of them were mobilized. Not to mention, he also used his personal connections to invite 2 peak-stage, soaring Dragon Realm cultivators from the county government to join the army. All of the preparations were made in the hope of winning in one battle. Chapter 298. As the saying goes, when there are more than 10,000 people, there is no end to it. A total of 5,000 people spread out, filling up the visual space and giving people a strong sense of oppression. Shi Jing led the army and used the flag of Rizhao County, which was directly taken from the county treasury. The main flag had the word Song embroidered on it, while the secondary flag had the word Shi. This bootlicking thought was very thorough. It was almost equivalent to Song Guang's family flag. Of course, this was also because the red cart pattern flag that represented Jia City was now in Jiang Wang's hands. He was over 50 years old and relied on his mother and father to become the lord of the city. Once he had the power, he would carry out his orders. Now that Shi Jing had the army in his hands, It was inevitable that he would feel proud. "Little Jiang," he shouted from afar, "you are still wet behind the ears, yet you dare to tear up my official documents. Today, the army of the king is coming. Do you know how powerful it is? Quickly surrender and hand over all your money and belongings. Then I may spare your life." Sometimes, mistakes in judgment were not because of how smart the opponent was, but because some people were hard to predict using normal logic. For example, Shi Jing. Logically speaking, he should be organizing disaster relief to fight against the sudden mutation of the plague. Or he would organize the troops and prepare to fight to save the country, or sacrifice himself for the country. Bringing people to rob money? That was really unexpected. Jiang Wang prepared for a rainy day and set up defenses in Qingyang town, but it was more to guard against the rebels when the country was about to collapse. At this time, the war between Yang and Qi hadn't started yet, but Shi Jing had mindlessly brought people to attack Qingyang town. No one expected this. As the saying goes, random fists can kill an old master. It didn't mean that the master was old and couldn't take a beating. It meant that the old master was used to all kinds of tricks and had a card up his sleeve, but when he met a newbie who didn't follow the rules, it was easy for him to be caught off guard. Although Jiang Wang disdained this person in his heart, he couldn't help but pay attention to the military formation outside the town. The Shi family had been in Jia City for hundreds of years, and many people were related to the Shi family. Among these 5,000 soldiers, because of the Shi family's withdrawal, there weren't many transcendents. However, the school of the military's battle formation arts focused on gathering strength. A well-trained army, even if they did not have many extraordinary powers, was definitely not to be underestimated. There were only 300 martial artists in the entire Qingyang town hall, and there was no military formation to assist them. They were of no help to the battle. Although he was cautious in his heart, Jiang Wang's face was filled with arrogance. He unfurled the carp-patterned red flag, in the color of blood swirled. He held it vertically in front of the town gate. This was a huge blow to the morale of the Jia City Guard army. This carp-patterned red flag wasn't just a magic weapon. It could also increase the strength of the battle formation, and it was also the support of their spirit and will. However, this flag was currently in the hands of the enemy. On the other hand, the 300 warriors belonging to Qingyang town were all in high spirits. His spiritual willpower and physical fitness had all been enhanced. Zhang Hai, Xiang Qian, Zhu Biqiong, the 4 transcendents of the Four Seas Commerce Alliance, and the 10 ordinary warriors were all included. It was a pity that Jiang Wang had not grasped the soldier formation arts. Otherwise, with the 7 transcendents as the nodes, it would be enough to completely link up the 300 people. Seeing Jiang Wang raise the flag in response, Shi Jing was instantly unable to restrain his anger. He did not say anything else. Raise the formation. As the main general of this battle, he ordered the city guard army to quickly get into formation. Baleful aura soared to the heavens. Long before, Jiang Wang had asked Zhu Biqiong to set up many illusory formations outside Qingyang town. He was afraid that when the situation was too chaotic, the defense would be too weak and unable to take care of everything. However, at this moment, when the baleful energy charged, these simple, illusory formations were broken. Outside Qingyang town, the baleful energy condensed. 2 huge strange fish, one black and one white, began to swim. Occasionally, they would soar into the sky and scatter the clouds. Occasionally, their huge tails would smash the ground, creating rumbling sounds. These were the yin-yang fish, and this formation was named the yin-yang swimming killing formation. Amidst this powerful aura, Shi Jing shouted loudly, "Everyone of Qingyang town, listen to my orders. Kill that Jiang brat with me, and you will be pardoned. If you are stubborn, when we break into the town, you will be killed without mercy." This threat had no effect on the martial artists of Qingyang town. They knew very well why Shi Jing was here. If the resources in the warehouse were taken away, what would they, their family and friends eat and use? What would they rely on to survive? They knew very well who they were fighting for. Thus, although they were confused and uneasy, none of them wavered. As for the people of the Four Seas Business Alliance, they were all scattered among the troops. Affected by the surrounding emotions, even if they wanted to retreat, it was impossible. The only person who could help them was Manager Qian, but at this moment, he was with Jiang Wang. The army moved forward. The huge yin-yang fish swam in the air. You don't dare to attack Qi's army, but you dare to kill your own people. Aren't these the soldiers of the Yang country? Jiang Wang injected his Tao energy and asked sternly. These words were like torture to their hearts. There was no professional soldier who did not have the belief to protect their country. However, even though the Qi army was at the border, they did not dare to fight. This kind of shame and cowardice deep in their hearts had not been wiped away for even a moment. Shi Jing brought them to attack Qingyang town and promised them large amounts of gold and silver. When they made up their minds, they took their weapons and charged. However, when they were asked why they did not dare to attack the Qi army, but only their own people, how could they remain calm? They could clearly feel that the yin-yang killing formation slowed down for a moment. At this moment, Jiang Wang used the carp-patterned red flag to sweep up the sea of blood. Blood energy rushed into the termination energy. Using Jia City's flag to suppress Jia City's army was just right. Jiang Wang spread out a sea of flame flowers in the air. The illusion flowers were smashed by the termination energy. The flowers that released the illusion poison in the sea of flowers were destroyed, and the flame flowers in the middle exploded. Even with the suppression of the carp-patterned red flag, the sea of flame flowers that was set up as a battlefield to deal with the encirclement collapsed. At this moment, the Sauvignon's sword came out of its sheath. The sun, the moon, the stars, the mountains, the rivers, and the sea of people. Jiang Wang's sword came one after another, crashing into the giant white fish, almost cutting the ball of termination energy into pieces. Broken limbs fell everywhere, blood splattered. Those are the soldiers that died in battle under these few swords. However, the giant black fish swam over in an instant, swinging its tail. Jiang Wang pulled his sword back in front of him, but he was also sent flying along with his sword. That was not the only shocking thing. After the giant black fish sent Jiang Wang flying, it suddenly opened its mouth and spat out a small white fish that jumped out and grew at a visible speed. The entire yin-yang killing formation instantly returned to its original state. This was the power of the military path killing formation. If it was one-on-one, Jiang Wang was confident that he could kill Shi Jing within 3 swords. However, the reality was that Shi Jing, who had an army, sent him flying in one exchange. He spat out blood in midair. Jiang Wang turned his body and landed in front of the town gate. He grabbed Manager Qian's shoulder. With what you have done, you will be the first to bear the brunt of the attack when it breaks. Manager Qian, aren't you going to follow me into the formation? He brought Manager Qian alone with him because he was afraid that he would not do his best in the town hall. After all, he was a soaring Dragon Realm expert, and his strength would be used to some extent. Although it was only a hurried sentence, it had already made the situation clear. Manager Qian gritted his teeth and said, "Of course." Then he felt his body become light. Jiang Wang had grabbed him and thrown him out like a javelin, throwing him into the army formation outside the town. Manager Qian swallowed the vulgarities in his stomach. He had no choice but to face the incoming giant black fish. He unleashed all his Tao energy. At this moment, he could no longer hide his strength. A huge golden ingot appeared in front of him out of thin air. Wealth is omnipotent. Please let me pass. The golden ingot instantly collided with the giant black fish and melted into it. The giant black fish actually ignored the will of the formation master and swung its tail in the air, dodging Manager Qian's figure. At the same time, Jiang Wang, who had slightly reorganized himself, charged forward again and pointed his sword at the giant white fish formed by the termination energy. Chapter 299. The long distance was covered in an instant, and the sword pierced through its body. Different from before, Jiang Wang clearly felt that the Sauvignon longing sword was being blocked tenaciously in the body of the giant white fish. After experiencing it once, the yin-yang killing formation had adjusted accordingly. Fine but continuous small waves of baleful energy rolled like waves, seemingly endless. It split and swallowed the sword energy again and again. "You can't do this." Jiang Yan's voice sounded in the Tong Tian Palace. "Let me help you." Jiang Wang ignored him. The 9-star river shone on the Tong Tian Palace. The star-twining snake jumped. With the 3 swords of heaven, earth, and man, Jiang Wang crashed into the body of the giant white fish and came out bathed in blood with dazzling sword energy. He had already charged out of the formation. The baleful energy of the giant white fish scattered behind him. On the other side, Manager Qian, as a soaring dragon realm expert, stepped into the air, using his wealth to ask the giant black fish to avoid him. Almost at the same time, Jiang Wang crashed into the body of the giant white fish. His 2 fingers slanted in front of him. A knife coin shrouded in purple energy formed between his 2 fingers. Its shape was the knife coin of Qi. As the currency of Qi, the knife coin was tainted with the luck of Qi. And the Four Seas Merchant Alliance, as one of the biggest trading companies in Qi, was allowed to borrow this luck to a certain extent. Of course, limited by Manager Qian's strength. What he could borrow was just an insignificant amount. But just this point was strong enough. Manager Qian held this knife coin and slashed it down. Money and goods are done. The Qi knife coin disappeared without a trace between his fingers. As for the huge black fish formed by the termination energy, it suddenly split into 2 halves. For a moment, the yin-yang killing formation that was only black and white was dyed red again. That was the blood of the dead and injured soldiers. In the surging, baleful energy, a shout sounded. Where the tip of the weapon points, those who block will be swept away. But only to see. The 2 halves of the giant black fish writhed as blood spurted out of its mouth. One guarded the yin, one turned to yang. Then they expanded, instantly forming the black and white yin and yang fish. Not only that, the giant black fish opened its mouth and spat out numerous blades, spears, swords, and halberds. Covering the sky and covering the earth, the whirlwind descended, attacking Jiang Wang, who had already rushed out of the formation with his sword in hand. The giant white fish waved its tail in the air and instantly disappeared from where it was, hitting Manager Qian with its head. This collision was like a landslide or a tsunami, condensed with the roars and killing intent of thousands of soldiers, and was about to swallow him up in an instant. But in the next moment, the golden belt around Deacon Qian's waist shone brightly. To be more precise, it was not the belt itself, but the small coin embedded in the middle of the belt. It was only a third of the size of a normal Qi knife coin, but at this moment, it was shining brightly. The treasure light vanished, and the giant white fish hit nothing. It had clearly crashed into him, but this blow had not killed him. Deacon Qian appeared in front of the gate of Qingyang Town, still in shock. "Ha!" The Qi knife coin embedded in the middle of his golden belt cracked and lost its brilliance. This was the money to buy life that was specially crafted by the Four Seas Business Alliance. Only deacons were given this. In the yin-yang killing formation, they bought Deacon Qian's life. At this time, the yin-yang killing formation was in front of Qingyang Town. Jiang Wang stood alone on the other side of the yin-yang killing formation, and his connection with Qingyang Town was separated by this formation. The yin-yang killing formation showed its power, wreaking havoc. The hearts of the people of Qingyang Town were in their throats, and they looked at the other side with apprehension. At this time, seemingly endless swords, spears, swords, and halberds came whistling, covering Jiang Wang's head and head. Jiang Wang stood in place, like a lonely peak. It was not that he could not see how embarrassed Deacon Qian was, or how dangerous the yin-yang killing formation was. But he did not move. Rumble, rumble. There seemed to be thunder rolling in the sky, but there were no clouds for thousands of miles. There was an ancient aura awakening, but people could only see the ferocity of the yin-yang giant fish of the yin-yang killing formation. The entire battlefield, and even Qingyang Town, was filled with primordial qi that was visible to the naked eye. Such a violent turbulence of primordial qi made people feel frightened and uneasy. In the void behind Jiang Wang, In an unknown place, a stone door gradually became clear. The door was tall, simple, and simple. There were 3 horizontal lines, which divided the door into 3 parts. There were vague characters on the stone door, but they were changing constantly. As soon as it appeared, the turbulent turbulence of primordial chi pushed the approaching termination energy away. This was the heaven and earth door. This kind of power was rare in the world. What is his background? Such a hero can't be just a follower of the Junginjia. Deacon Qian was shocked and speechless. Even though he had traveled extensively and done business in the world, he had never seen anyone who could cause such a scene just by materializing the heaven and earth door. For Jiang Wang, such a heaven and earth door was not perfect, but that was all he could do. Who didn't yearn to be invincible in the world? The reason why he had not broken through and repeatedly polished himself was that he wanted to explore the limit of the reaching heaven state and reach the position that only the most outstanding geniuses could reach. He even wanted to see if he could break through the limit. He was already approaching it step by step, and it was not an unreachable illusion. But today, the situation did not allow him to stop. Although the Jia City Protection Army couldn't be considered a strong army, a few thousand elite soldiers gathered together to form a military formation was still not a weak force. Shi Jing controlled this formation and had the power to easily sweep through Qingyang town. Jiang Wang had no choice but to stop and choose to break through temporarily. He only needed to break the horizontal lines and push open the door, and he would immediately be able to soar with his Dao meridians and see a different kind of scenery. From the yin-yang wandering killing formation came Shi Jing's angry voice. "You dare to break through in front of the army?" The military formation was activated and immediately suppressed the chaotic primordial chi. The termination energy exploded, gathering everything, the blade showing edge, the spear pointing star, the sword chopping aura, the great halberd smashing fury. You must know that the killing techniques of the military school are the craziest. The giant white fish suddenly moved, and after the termination energy, it crashed into Jiang Wang. The heaven and earth door was right behind him, but he wanted to make Jiang Wang unable to free himself to push open the door. Jiang Wang held his sword in front of him, blood swirling around him. He had already left the termination energy, and using the cart pattern red flag that was connected to the Jia City Guard, he once again crashed into the yin-yang wandering killing formation. Shi Jing was not alarmed, but happy. This person entering the formation was like a bird entering a cage. The yin fish leapt backwards, the yang fish turned around. However, what he neglected was that as Jiang Wang entered the formation this time, the heaven and earth gate that belonged to Jiang Wang that was hidden in the void also followed. The primordial chi instantly became chaotic again, and in the next moment, it was suppressed again. But in this moment, Jiang Wang turned around and swung his sword, and with one sword, the sea of people was vast. In the chaotic and gorgeous sword light, in the sea of people with all kinds of emotions, he finally saw Shi Jing hiding in the army. Advancing with the sword, sabers, spears, swords, halberds, staffs, the termination energy transformed into countless weapons, layer by layer, attacking Jiang Wang. 2 giant yin and yang fish crisscrossed, waiting for a chance to attack. Trapped in the formation, it was like entering a quagmire. The more one struggled, the faster one would be buried. The further one went, the closer one would be to death. And Jiang Wang continued to advance. Jiangxi danced into a ray of silver light, attacking the countless attacks in the formation. Every step forward required the greatest explosion of Dao energy. For steps, these were extremely fast, but extremely difficult 4 steps. In just 4 steps, Jiang Wang was covered in blood. But after 4 steps, he already saw Shi Jing. Their eyes met. An 18-year-old youth, an old man over 50 years old, Jiang Wang alone with a sword, and the respected city master, Shi Jing. One was covered in scars. The other had a strong military formation in his hands. But their gazes were so different. From Shi Jing's shocked gaze, Jiang Wang saw his determined and courageous self. And sure, Jing saw in horror. Behind Jiang Wang, a seemingly tangible willpower grabbed the faint door in the air. An unknown reflection of the void appeared. Rumble. Jiang Wang actually used the power of his spirit to pull up the heaven and earth door. And this heaven and earth door was directly pulled out of the void. All the violent primordial chi was flattened and smashed fiercely on Shi Jing's head. Chapter 300. Bang! The unknown void reflected reality, and the gate of heaven and earth materialized. In the army of 5,000 people, Jiang Wang pulled up the gate of heaven and earth with his spiritual power and smashed it down, smashing Shi Jing's skull until it cracked. He was not dead yet, and he was still gathering the army's energy and rousing his Tao energy, forcibly holding up the incomparably heavy gate. The sword in Jiang Wang's hand did not stop, responding to the attack of the yin-yang killing formation with a fast sword. His spiritual power lifted the gate of heaven and earth again and smashed it down again. Bang! 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 This repeated 3 times. After 3 times, Shi Jing's Tao energy and will finally collapsed, and his entire body was smashed from top to bottom, smashing into a pile of meat paste. After this sound, there was a long silence. Even Qian Xiang, who had always been dispirited, was shocked. He had traveled extensively and had seen a lot since he was young, but he had never seen someone use the gate of heaven and earth as a weapon. Looking through the long river of history, this was also a creation that had never been recorded. Deacon Qian rubbed his eyes hard, wondering if he had been mesmerized by the illusion. Shouldn't he find a chance to push open the gate and break through? How could he directly pull up the gate of heaven and earth? Zhu Biqiang was overwhelmed with emotions, and Zhang Hai was shocked speechless. Du Guxiao was so excited that she clenched her fists and bit her lips. The entire yin-yang killing formation stopped for a moment because of this. Jiang Wang simply sheathed his sword, and his sleeves were blown up by the explosive force. His streamlined muscles bulged, and he directly grabbed the gate of heaven and earth with both hands and strode forward. Like a fierce beast, he smashed left and right. Bang! 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 At first, there was still some scattered resistance, but under the organization of several city guard generals, the army recovered. But with Jiang Wang's crazy rush, the murderous weapons formed by the evil spirit collapsed in large numbers, and the 2 yin-yang giant fish actually collapsed on the spot. During this process, Jiang Wang's aura became higher and higher, more and more solid. There was a clear cracking sound that rang in everyone's ears. Then there was a second sound and a third sound. Crack, crack, crack. The stone gate in his hand, the horizontal lines on it, collapsed one by one. The heavenly lines opened. The earth lines opened. The human lines opened. Boom! It was as if endless vitality was pouring into it. Heaven and earth gate open. Inside the heavenly palace, the 9 great starry river vortexes spun crazily, and countless perfectly round Tao essence gushed out like a spring. As for the star twining spirit snake that represented the Tao vein true spirit, it leaped up, its body expanding by more than 10 times. He transformed into a star-twisting python and swam around the dome of the Heavenspan Palace. All of a sudden, the roar of an azure dragon could be heard. Jiang Wang felt that his entire spine had been pulled out of his body. His essence, qi, and spirit had become his spine. His flesh and blood were like dead skin, as if he would shed his skin in the next moment. Of course, this was just an illusion. What had left wasn't the spine, but the Heavenspan Palace that had almost overlapped with the spine before the breakthrough. His Tao meridian soared like a dragon, turning in his body and leaping into the sea of torso. Jiang Wang could now see the ocean in his torso. It was a boundless sea with surging waves, as if it would never stop surging. Above the sea, a white fog covered the sky. It was an innate fog of obscurity. Damaging one's soul and grinding one's spirit was nothing difficult. The Tao Meridian true dragons of many soaring dragon realm cultivators were lost in this fog, melting away and dying. In the ocean of Torso, apart from the sea, there was only fog. Nothing else could be seen. The world was boundless. The Tao Meridian True Dragon that Jiang Wang had leaped to this place was so lonely. But at this moment, in the boundless sea, a lone reef grew from the bottom of the sea, gradually protruding from the surface. Near this reef, the surging sea gradually calmed down. The reef expanded at an extremely fast speed. This speed could be called crazy because there was too much feedback between heaven and earth, almost surging over. When it stopped expanding, an island with a radius of 100 miles appeared in its place. Without waiting for Jiang Wang to control it, the Tao Meridian transformed into a dragon that leaped onto the island, breaking away from the entanglement of the obscurity. This was Jiang Wang's worldly isolated island. When he explored the Torso Sea in the future, this island would be the habitat of the soaring dragon Tao Meridian. It was also the base of the cultivators' resistance against the obscurity, their headquarters. This so-called 100 miles had nothing to do with the main world, of course. It was a measurement that only existed in the Torso Sea, but it didn't affect its terror. In the notes that Jiang Wang had read, the worldly isolated island didn't exceed a radius of 10 miles. The moment the worldly isolated island was officially completed, the obscurity in the sky instantly retreated 100 miles. Jiang Wang could clearly feel it. In the boundless obscurity, there was a strong calling coming from the position of the first inner palace, and that call came from the divine ability seed in the inner palace. Early on in the heavenly palace secret realm, he had already reserved the divine ability. In other words, if Jiang Wang was willing, he could directly knock on the inner palace, pluck the divine ability, and use the power of the divine ability to appear in the world. The difference between the divine ability inner palace and the ordinary inner palace was like the difference of a realm. What yin-yang wandering killing formation? What Rizhao prefectural governor? They could be destroyed with a flick of the finger. But was the divine ability the end? Although the temptation was strong, it wasn't worth mentioning to Jiang Wang. The changes in his body were complicated, but in fact, it was completed in a few breaths in the main world. The heaven and earth gate was opened and disappeared in the main world. And Jiang Wang, who had a soaring dragon Tao Meridian and stood on the worldly isolated island, was already a genuine soaring dragon realm cultivator. Chirp, chirp, chirp. It was also at this moment that the sharp chirping of birds suddenly sounded in the yin-yang killing formation. Chirp, chirp, chirp. Crimson flame sparrows flew up from Jiang Wang's body. They were densely packed, chirping and crashing in all directions. This was the low-grade, A-grade Dao technique that Jiang Wang won from Qi Prince Jiang Wuyong, the explosive flame sparrow. Jiang Wang had been familiar with it for a long time, but he was finally able to use it when he officially entered the soaring dragon realm. As soon as it appeared, it shocked everyone. The violent flame sparrows pecked at the soldiers, causing waves of flames to surge. The yin-yang wandering killing formation, which was formed by 5,000 city guards, was first smashed to death, then swept by the brutal and merciless heaven and earth gate. Now it was blown apart by an A-class Taoist magic art from the inside. The formation was in chaos for a while. At this moment, Qian Qian, Zhu Biqiong, and Zhang Hai led the 300 warriors of Qingyang Town Hall. Like 3 sharp knives, they plunged straight into the yin-yang killing formation. This was the timing that Jiang Wang had ordered in advance. Without the support of the military formation, the strength of the warriors of Qingyang Town Hall was bound to collapse in the face of the yin-yang killing formation of 5,000 soldiers. But at this moment, it was the right time. The formation almost collapsed in an instant. The army of 5,000 soldiers scattered, and the city guards of Jia City were like headless flies. Some fled, some rushed, and all of them were disorderly. And under the killing of the transcendent cultivators of Qingyang Town, led by Jiang Wang, those generals who were able to organize a counterattack were instantly killed. They could only passively accept the slaughter. A defeated army was worse than chickens and dogs. Throw away your weapons and kneel down to surrender. You may be spared. Jiang Wang held a long sword and walked in the air, shouting loudly. For a time, The sound of weapons falling to the ground was endless, and the people kneeling on the ground were densely packed. Even the dispirited Qian Qian and the naive Zhu Biqiong couldn't help but show joy on their faces. Victory! At this moment, a voice sounded in the distance. This is a good show. The voice sounded mighty and loud. At first, it was very far away, but when it sounded again, it was already in the field. But if you kneel down and beg for mercy now, you can't avoid death. P.S. Before the first wave subsides, another wave rises. This high harmony tide is endless. Alas, if only subscriptions and recommendation tickets could be like this. Of course, I'm just suggesting. Chapter 301. Following the sound, the tall and majestic dragonbone mask fell like a meteor, smashing into the ground and stirring up smoke and dust, including the Jia City soldiers kneeling on the ground begging for their lives. They couldn't help but look over in shock. As for Manager Qian of the Four Seas Business Alliance, he didn't say anything and directly ran away. He actually abandoned everything in Qingyang town and ran for his life alone. He completely knew how terrifying the Dragonbone Mask was. In his opinion, Qingyang town had no power to resist against an inner palace expert. If they ran too late, they might lose their lives. Needless to say, when Jiang Wang saw the Dragonbone Mask, he knew there was no turning back. But he didn't plan to run. He had just broken the horizontal lines, opened the heaven and earth gate, destroyed the yin-yang killing formation, and captured thousands of soldiers. No matter if it was his aura or intent, he was at his peak. There was no reason to retreat before fighting, even if the opponent was an inner palace expert. Evil, you dare to exaggerate. Jiang Wang stood in midair, mobilizing the power of the car-patterned red flag, and rushing towards him with a sea of blood. In the sea of blood, flowers bloomed again. A cold sword light shot out, heading straight for the opponent. In the face of an inner palace expert, not only did he not retreat, he attacked first. How dare you? The Dragonbone Mask stretched out a pair of large hands. These hands weren't humanoid, with scales on the joints and claws on the fingers. They were bright gold, violent and fierce. He had already refined the white bone Dharma into his body. His body was a dragon. He stood on the ground without moving, his hands pulling to the sides. The flame flowers and illusion flowers were torn apart, and the sea of blood was also split apart. Rip! It was clearly the sea of blood being split apart, but there was the sound of cloth tearing. Looking at the direction of the carp-patterned red flag, the entire carp-patterned red flag was torn apart. This flag had been cut apart by Jiang Wang's sword before, and after being repaired, it was restored to its original appearance. But now it was destroyed with one strike. The Dragonbone Mask's eyes seemed to be dyed with gold dust as he raised his head and looked at the sea of blood and flowers that had been split apart. Jiang Wang, who was charging over with a sword. He rose from the ground and was already close to Jiang Wang. One of them came from below, while the other came from afar. Time seemed to have frozen. The moment they clashed, life and death would be decided. The crown of thorns on Jiang Wang's head flashed. At the same time, he used the Dao technique Binding Tiger. However, golden light flashed from the Dragonbone Mask's body, and it continued to charge forward without any hesitation, raising its claws. The Binding Tiger, enhanced by the crown of thorns, couldn't even trap him for half a breath. At this point, Jiang Wang knew very well that under these circumstances, the three swords of heaven, earth, and man could at most injure this person, but could not kill him. A single claw from the Dragonbone face was enough to tear him apart. The physique tempered by the Four Spirits body refinement technique was completely useless against such a strong killing power. Whether it was Qian Qian, Zhang Hai, or Zhu Biqiong, it seemed that none of them had the ability to intervene in the battle. The situation was critical. Just when the two of them were about to fight to the death, bang, 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 bang. Fire elemental energy condensed around Jiang Wang's body and exploded continuously. Jiang Wang's entire body seemed to have transformed into a ball of fire as he instantly charged towards the horizon. This was one of the rewards he had won from Jiang Wuyong. Fire Elemental Escape Technique, Flaming Meteor. Jiang Wang, who had retreated to a high altitude, still had a lingering fear in his heart. Too powerful. Although he couldn't be considered invincible in the reaching heaven state, he was close to the limit and was among the strongest. He had pushed open the heaven and earth door with his almost invincible strength in the reaching heaven state, and had just entered the soaring dragon state. However, he was still far from being a match for the Dragon Bone Face. Although Jiang Wang hadn't seen all of the 12 bone faces of the White Bone Path, this person was definitely number one. Good escape technique. The Dragon Bone Face's voice seemed to always be filled with dignity and confidence. Even though Jiang Wang had taken the initiative to launch a strong attack, even though Jiang Wang had narrowly escaped from his claws, he only gave a slight praise. All of these could only make him give a light praise, but it couldn't change the outcome. Boom! With him as the center, translucent ripples instantly spread out in the air. He was getting closer. Without hesitation, Jiang Wang transformed into a flaming meteor again and fled into the distance. How long will you last? The Dragon Bone Face's claws reached out again, and Jiang Wang once again unleashed a flaming meteor. Thus, the two began a chase in the air. The city guard captives kneeling on the ground didn't dare to move, nor did they dare to completely resign themselves to fate. They could only raise their necks and observe the battle in the air. The people of Qingyang Town Hall had just celebrated their victory and encountered such a powerful opponent. The flames of excitement that had just sprouted were extinguished by a basin of ice water. Not to mention the 300 warriors who couldn't affect the battle at all. The Four Seas Commerce Alliance's transcendent practitioners had already taken the opportunity to escape. Not only were the others' morale low, even Jiang Wang himself couldn't be optimistic about the battle. The principle of the flaming meteor was to use the continuous explosion of fire elemental energy to propel the caster. It was a short-distance escape technique. Its speed was extremely fast, but it wasn't suitable for long-distance travel. Compared to the current battle situation, it couldn't last long. And right at this moment, something even worse happened. A scream sounded and was stopped. A fleeing Four Seas Commerce Alliance transcendent practitioner shot over from afar. To be more precise, it was his corpse that was projected back to him. A thin and weak guy wearing a monkey bone face stepped on the corpse of another Four Seas Commerce Alliance cultivator and fell from the sky. Behind him, the rabbit bone face walked over slowly, one in each hand, carrying the two remaining Four Seas Commerce Alliance cultivators' corpses. Bang bang! The two corpses were thrown to the ground. The rabbit bone face clapped his hands and looked at the battle unfolding in the air. He said softly, "I was wondering why Brother Long hadn't finished the battle yet. This kid runs really fast." The monkey bone face glanced at the sky and laughed strangely. What's so difficult about that? He stepped on the ground and shot toward Qingyang Town. His voice was sharp and tyrannical, and every word was directed at Jiang Wang. "Young man, is this the place you're guarding? Carrying out your beliefs and practicing your principles?" With his cultivation at the peak of the soaring dragon realm, he stirred the air and gathered a huge cone of air in front of him, fiercely crashing toward Qingyang Town. "Are you just going to watch them die?" The monkey-faced man's attack was to make Jiang Wang turn back so that he could be killed by the dragon-faced man, or at least to shake Long Mian's will and delay his speed. However, Jiang Wang in the air turned a deaf ear to him. He stared at Long Mian and seized the opportunity to dodge with the flame meteor. It was not that he was cold-blooded or indifferent to the lives of the people in Qingyang Town. It was that in this situation, the useless Yiru was just a burden. His death couldn't save those people at all. On the contrary, only by living could he have a chance to turn the tables. In the face of such a strong man like Long Mian, he had exhausted all his strength in a short time. Thinking about other things was just seeking death. But Jiang Wang didn't want to die. He didn't want to die, no matter how strong Long Mian was and how desperate he was. Zhang Hai was just a wandering pulse state cultivator who was obsessed with refining elixirs. Although Zhu Biqiang was in the reaching heaven state, her strength was far inferior to Hu Xiaoming, let alone the strength to fight across realms. Not to mention those mortal martial artists. The monkey bone face at the peak of the soaring dragon realm came with power like a tiger in a flock of sheep. It was a massacre. All of a sudden, a cold star appeared. Chapter 302. A cold star appeared in the eyes of the monkey-faced man. As soon as it appeared, the extreme sharpness had already pierced through the air. Using sharpness to break sharpness, its power penetrated gold and cracked stone, arriving in a flash. The monkey-faced man let out a strange cry, and the bone monkey image disappeared in a flash. His whole body turned halfway and soared into the sky, continuously changing 9 positions, and finally waiting for the cold star's power to weaken. His hands shook, and 2 daggers jumped out, crisscrossing in front of him. Clang! He retreated 7 steps before standing firm, and finally saw clearly what the cold star in front of him was. It was a flying sword hovering in mid-air. The tip of the sword was pointing directly at the monkey-faced man. Under the shocked eyes of the people of Qingyang Town, Fang Chong stood forward lazily, no longer hiding his cultivation of the soaring dragon realm. With a stroke of his fingers, the flying sword flashed, emitting a sharp whistling sound. It arrived in front of the monkey-faced man at an extremely terrifying speed. Rabbit-faced help. The monkey-faced man was not careless and immediately called for help. At the same time, he used the white bone image, and his body turned skillfully in the air, leaving behind layers of shadows. The white bone paths, 12 divine images, each had their own strengths. The monkey-faced man's image was proficient in speed and hundreds of changes, known as divine travel. It was not inferior to the flying sword in terms of agility. For a moment, 2 chasing battlefields appeared at the same time. The dragon image chased after Jiang Wang, and Fang Chong's flying sword chased after the monkey-faced man. On the other side, the rabbit-faced man had already jumped high and directly raised his leg to press down, wanting to break the battle. Just from the biting, cold sound of the wind, it was enough to see the power of this move. But in front of his eyes, there were 2 destitute men pointing at the flying sword in front of him. It was Zhu Biqiang who had timely launched an illusion. "Huh!" The rabbit-faced man shouted, and his body was wrapped in green light, directly breaking the illusion with his cultivation of the peak of the soaring dragon realm. Zhu Biqiang vomited blood and retreated. But with this obstruction, Fang Chong had already crooked his index finger. The cold light pierced the monkey-faced man, and in another flash, it was already close to the rabbit-faced man. The rabbit-faced man had no choice but to turn around and swing his leg upside down, wanting to block the sword. "Facing me, you dare to turn your sword." The monkey-faced man had not stopped shouting, and he had already used his daggers to cut Fang Chong's throat. Before the dagger arrived, 2 sharp lines had already appeared. Fang Xiu had no choice but to evade. At the same time, he flicked his flying sword to abandon the rabbit's face and return to his front. Clang, 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 clang. The dagger and the flying sword clashed continuously, and the rabbit, bone-faced person in the air directly bounced up, its body wrapped in jade light, and lifted its knee to smash towards Zhu Biqiang. She was determined to kill this hindrance first, and then turn around to attack together with the monkey. Zhu Biqiang repeatedly used her illusions, but she couldn't stop the rabbit face at all. The difference in strength was too great, so she was unable to confuse the rabbit's eyes. His illusions were broken one after another, but he couldn't stop the blood from flowing from the corner of his mouth. The rabbit-faced man's knee was already close, but suddenly he swung his hand back in midair and grabbed a trembling long saber. She turned around and looked into Duge Zhao's eyes. Looking at this pair of eyes, the determination in his eyes had turned into panic. This knife was thrown by Duge Zhao in order to save Zhu Biqiang. She had already practiced martial arts for a period of time. Her strength and accuracy were not lacking. What was rare was her precise grasp of timing. However, to an expert like Rabbit Face, it was truly too insignificant. But at this moment, another firm and brave voice sounded. Brothers of Qingyang Town, behind us is our hometown. Can we still retreat? It was Hu Xuanzi. This ordinary, stout man, as a man, raised his saber. He was the first to charge towards the transcendent cultivator. Let's fight with them, he shouted. He couldn't say anything too wonderful, so he could only howl dryly like this. But he was brave, firm, and didn't flinch at all. Whoosh! A long saber. The long saber thrown by Dugu Xiao in order to kill Zhu Biqiong was thrown out by Rabbit Face with a speed and strength 100 times stronger. It directly pierced through Hu Xuanzi's body, shooting all the way to Qingyang Town behind the people, deeply embedded in a wall, trembling endlessly. Hu Xuanzi turned his head with difficulty. He didn't look at his empty chest, but glanced at Xiao Xiao. He crashed to the ground. Just like that, this all-out charge ended so easily. For Rabbit Face, it was no more complicated than stepping on an ant. Behind him, the warriors of Qingyang Town, who had been boiling and had begun to charge forward, abruptly stopped their footsteps. All the anger seemed to be easily extinguished together with the fire of courage. With such a huge gap in strength, how could their ending be better than Hu Xuanzi's? Dugu Xiao was stunned, as if he had lost the ability to speak, as if he didn't know how to move. He just looked at it in a daze. However, who would care about these ordinary, and powerless people? Who would care about their feelings? What did I say? Forward's voice. He laughed lowly and said this with a smile. Buzz, 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 buzz. A low, hurried hum. This sound rang around Qingyang Town, dense, short, and continuous. There was a cold light. Dense cold light came from all directions, from many corners, and gathered in front of him. When those cold lights approached, people could see clearly that they were the shadows of flying swords. This was the sword formation set up by Forward at the request of Jiangwan. All the shadows of flying swords were projected in front of Forward, into the real flying sword floating in front of him. It flashed away. All this seemed to be an illusion, as if nothing had happened. There was only Forward and his flying sword. He still looked down and out, unshaven, with a pair of indifferent dead fish eyes. But his flying sword was completely different. There was no need to describe the sharpness. It was the sharpness itself. But when the sword formation disappeared, Forward bent his index finger slightly and flicked. The flying sword swept up an incomparably violent and sharp whistling sound, shooting out and penetrating all the chaotic airflow. Space, primordial chi, and the power of Taoist magic arts could not be an obstacle. The monkey bone-faced man moved rapidly in the air, breaking out the strongest speed and releasing the extreme state of body movement. He truly displayed the speed of divine travel. But in the next moment, he fell to the ground like a broken bag. The entire Tongtian palace collapsed, and his body was like a sieve, constantly leaking Taoist energy. Until death, his eyes were still wide open in disbelief. The rabbit-bone-faced man did not say anything and flew to the dragon-bone-faced man's side. Forward was not in a hurry to pursue, but walked to the side of Hu Xuanzi's corpse. He did not have any feelings for Hu Xuanzi, nor did he grieve for him. However, he did see his powerless self in Hu Xuanzi. What did I say? Forward asked again. He looked at Hu Xuanzi's corpse and said, You see, no matter how hard you try, it is useless. He half squatted down, wanting to close Hu Xuanzi's eyes that should not have died in peace. But when he lowered his head, he was stunned. Hu Xuanzi was indeed dead. Useless, powerless, and seemingly worthless, they died. But his expression before death was very satisfied. Chapter 303. I don't know if Lu Man is far or not, Master Xiang. I'm just looking, that's good enough. Just looking, that's good enough. At the last moment of his life, Hu Xuanzi still tried hard to look at Dugu Xiao. That's it. That's good enough. There were too many powerless people in the world, but at the same time, there were too many willing people. He stood up. That's good enough. Then he took a step forward and flicked his finger. The flying sword shot out once more. The violent howl made the flying sword seem like it was a vicious creature that had a life of its own. All of this happened very slowly, but in the battle, it happened very quickly. At this time, Long Mian and Jiang Wang were in the air, but they had only exchanged a dozen blows. If you continue like this, you'll be killed sooner or later. Jiang Yan's voice echoed in Tong Tian Palace. Jiang Wang stared at Long Mian's eyes, constantly burning his Dao energy so that he could avoid the attack at the first moment. Jiang Wang, you know that I know the techniques of the White Bone Path very well, Jiang Yan said. The flaming meteor exploded again, and Jiang Wang appeared in another corner in the air, casually flicking out a few flame flowers as a barrier. At this moment of intense fighting, Dao techniques like the explosive flame sparrow and the sea of flame flowers could not be used in time. And the sea of flame flowers had already proven its powerlessness against Long Mian. Instant cast Dao techniques like Binding Tiger and Flame Flowers were also ineffective. If not for Jiang Wang and the three swords of heaven, earth, and man, which could suddenly pose a threat, he would have been captured by Long Mian long ago. But as Long Mian became more familiar with the flaming meteor and Jiang Wang's swordsmanship, it was only a matter of time. Long Mian's weakness is the top of his head. Let me do it. I can kill him in 10 breaths. Jiang Yin shouted. Shut up. Jiang Wang replied in Tong Tian Palace. No matter what, he could not give up his body. If he really had to die, he would rather cut off his own Dao path and take his divine power first. At this moment, he flicked his sword forward. He was only in the soaring dragon realm, and he fought back and forth with Long Mian. But after using the sword array, he already had the power of an intermansion realm cultivator. With a flick of his finger, he killed Monkey Face, and with another flick of his finger, he attacked Dragon Face with his sword. Brother Long, the rabbit bone-faced man reminded him in a shrill voice. Long Mian, who was chasing Jiang Wang all over the sky, suddenly turned around. His fist, covered in golden scales, smashed right into the incoming flying sword. The flying sword immediately tilted and flew away as if it had been injured. The corner of Xiang Qian's mouth inevitably overflowed with blood. This flying sword of yours is very interesting. After Long Mian finished speaking, he took a step forward and crashed into the flying sword, smashing down with his fist again. The flying sword fell to the ground. Pooh! He spat out a mouthful of blood and was severely injured. Chirp, 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 chirp. A sharp explosion sounded again. Long Mian turned around, but the space in front of him was already filled with flame sparrows, and there was no way to avoid them. Then he closed his eyes, and a golden light burst out from his body. Golden scales crawled all over his body, making him look like a demon. Dang, 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 dang. It was the sound of the flame sparrow pecking his body. The high-quality A-class low-grade Taoist technique from the royal family of Qi was unable to break through his defense. Boom! With a thought, Jiang Wang detonated all the flame sparrows in an instant, and countless sounds merged into one sound. The violent fire elemental energy temporarily occupied the space and forced the other elemental energies away. At this moment, Xiang Qian ignored his injuries, bit the tip of his tongue, and flicked his finger again. The flying sword that had fallen to the ground leaped up again. This leap was like a carp leaping over the dragon's gate. With an invincible aura, it collided with Long Mian's back. This sword caused a sudden clap of thunder and stirred up the wind and clouds. It had the aura of a sword in the sky and on earth. People seemed to be able to see Xiang Qian colliding with the sword, even though he was clearly standing on the same spot. That way, he looked like a loser. Who would notice? The flying sword was him, and he was the flying sword. This sword was him. There was nothing that he could not kill. Jiang Wang's timing was too good. Even someone as strong as Long Mian could not say that he would be unscathed in the center of the flame sparrow's attack. The first round of sharp pecking was indeed blocked by Long Mian's scales, but the violent explosion caused in an instant caused him to suffer a loss. Before he could recover, Xiang Qian's flying sword had already arrived. Alarm bells rang in his mind. Even he did not dare to take this sword head-on. The air around him exploded again. His entire person was like a mountain rock falling to the ground, avoiding the sharp edge of the sword as he fell. However, when the person arrived, the sword also arrived. After this delay, Long Mian discovered that the sword did not weaken. Instead, as it pursued, it became stronger and stronger. Delaying was not a good strategy. He quickly made a decision. The golden light that was so dense that it could not be dispersed almost wrapped his fist in gold. The golden fist suddenly exploded forward. The flying sword stopped for a moment. The ground under Long Mian's feet sank several inches. On his fist, there were even drops of blood dripping down. All of this was quiet and then moved again. The entire flying sword flew back, tilting its head forward and falling down. Long Mian could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Facing such a fierce sword head-on, even he could not help but suffer heavy injuries. However, this was the choice he had made after weighing the pros and cons. With the cultivation of the soaring dragon realm, he could reach the killing power of an inner mansion realm elite. What kind of sword path was this? Long Mian was still bewildered. Rabbit Bone Mian's panicked voice sounded behind him. Brother Long? What happened to you? She was really a weak woman. Long Mian thought coldly. However, of the original 12 White Bone Mian, only the 2 of them were left now, just some minor injuries. Long Mian was halfway through his words when he suddenly changed. You! Rabbit Bone Mian came behind Long Mian, as if to join forces with him to fight the enemy. However, after rushing over, the pair of timid eyes behind the mask suddenly turned red. The weak rabbit face's strongest move was the bloodthirsty and crazy side. Just as her eyes turned red, a broken thorn had already pierced into Long Mian's back. Before Long Mian could turn around and strike with his elbow, she had already somersaulted away. The speed and power displayed in these few movements were not inferior to the monkey face who had fully activated his Dharma form. Where was that weak and helpless rabbit girl? Heart-loathing thorn. Feeling the rapid weakening of his heart, Long Mian instantly understood what kind of attack he had encountered. As the name implied, this heart-loathing thorn would definitely destroy the heart. It was a vicious artifact that specifically targeted the heart. Similar to the energy shackling all that restricted the flow of the opponent's Tao energy, it was a series of consumable artifacts. It was expensive, but had extraordinary effects. Of course, compared to the energy shackling all, the heart-loathing thorn was much more precious and much more powerful. Hu Xiaoming used the energy shackling all to end the soaring dragon realm elder of the Shi family. Rabbit Face also used the heart-loathing thorn to rapidly worsen Long Mian's injuries. Of course, Jiang Wang would not miss such a good opportunity. No matter what happened inside the White Bone Path, this was the best opportunity. Therefore, while Long Mian was counterattacking and Rabbit Face was retreating, Jiang Wang was charging forward. With himself as the hilt and Kanesha as the blade, his entire body turned into a stream of light. His sword pierced through the mountains and rivers, the earth, the sun, the moon, and the stars, rushing above Long Mian. Long Mian wanted to react immediately, but his body was unavoidably weakening bit by bit. Tong Tian Palace madly operated. His inner palace violently surged. 2 sources of power forcibly supported his body, pulling his self-weakening abyss upwards, 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 upwards. But it was a little too late. Jiang Wang had already landed with his sword. Kanesha fell vertically, piercing through Long Mian's body from the top of his head. If he had not been vigilant enough, no matter how vicious the heart-loathing thorn was, it would not have been able to pierce his body. If Jiang Wang had not been so decisive, he would have been able to regenerate the power to counterattack if he had been given a breath's time. Even if, at the first moment when he was hit by the heart-loathing thorn, he did not think to counterattack Rabbit Face, but to use the power of this attack to deal with Jiang Wang. The outcome might have been different. However, he had underestimated Fang Qiu, underestimated Jiang Wang, and even underestimated Rabbit Face. Making so many mistakes in one battle was already the cause of death. But the most frightening thing was that he had underestimated that person. At this moment, Long Mian understood everything, but he could only let out a painful roar filled with hatred. Zhang Linchuan. Chapter 304. Pulling out the sword neatly, the dragon bone face's tall body crashed to the ground. Hearing the name he shouted before he died, Jiang Wang didn't say a word. He turned his sword and looked at the rabbit face. They were both in the soaring dragon realm. Even if he had fought for a long time and was almost exhausted, he still had the confidence to kill her. But as soon as the dragon face died, the red-eyed rabbit face shot away without hesitation, not giving Jiang Wang a chance to entangle her. An intermansion realm expert died in Qingyang town just like that. The Jia City soldiers who witnessed this were all shocked, speechless. At this time in Qingyang town, Zhu Biqiang was injured and Fang Qian was seriously injured. Jiang Wang first broke the yin-yang wandering killing formation, then fought the dragon bone face. After a long, bitter battle, it could be said that the entire Qingyang town was exhausted. But they didn't dare to act rashly, because Jiang Wang was still standing. There while the fight had been completely destroyed by this youth. Jiang Wang leapt to Fang Qian's side. After checking his injuries, he helped him up. Fang Qian's contributions in this battle couldn't go unnoticed. If it weren't for his powerful battle strength, Jiang Wang would have opened his inner mansion ahead of time and chosen to take the divine ability. No matter how strong the dragon face was, there was a gap to open his inner mansion and take the divine ability. He still had the confidence to win on his own. But in that way, his Dao path would inevitably be cut off. "Are you all right?" Jiang Wang asked. Fang Qian struggled and rolled his eyes. He didn't say anything. After this battle, their relationship was naturally different. He sent people to invite the town's only transcendent medical cultivator. In a previous battle, Jiang Wang wasn't willing to ask the old man for help. Of course, he didn't come from a large medical sect like the East King Valley. His battle strength was nothing to write home about. He was better at saving people. After the old medical cultivator began to treat Fang Qian and Zhu Biqiang's injuries, Jiang Wang finally had time to reorganize the battlefield. He first ordered the town hall martial artists to confiscate the city guard's weapons. But how to deal with the thousands of soldiers was difficult for a while. But when it came to outsiders, whether it was lenient or strict, it was easy to deal with. But when it came to his own people, it was even more hesitant. Not to mention Fang Jin, who was lying like a dead fish. It was hard for Jiang Wang to say that he didn't feel guilty for Zhu Biqiang, who was still in shock. Initially, she was only supposed to help him with his work for half a year. Previously, when he fought against the plague and set up the illusory formation, it was one thing for him to order her around like a coolie. This time, however, he had caused her to encounter a life and death crisis. She, who had been through a lot, was indeed frightened. But it was precisely because of this fear that she still participated in the battle under that kind of situation, which was especially valuable. "Your ball of fortune and disaster isn't very accurate," Jiang Wang said dryly. The ball of fortune and calamity could only be used once a month, and it would only take effect on that day. It would reflect the fortune and calamity of a certain period of time in real time. At that time, right before the heavenly clear cloud goat was born, the ball of fortune and disaster reacted. It wasn't that Jiang Wang didn't know this. He was just trying to find a topic to talk about. Zhu Biqiang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She didn't say anything and just closed her red eyes. If only Ru Cheng was here, Jiang Wang sighed silently in his heart. He turned his head again and looked at Duga Xiao. That little one was hugging his knees and sitting in front of Xuanzi's corpse. He didn't cry or make a fuss. He was completely stunned and stiff. Jiang Wang wanted to say something, but he didn't know what to say for a moment. Just as the dust settled, a whistling sound came from the horizon again. Fang Jin sat up abruptly. Zhu Biqiang also opened her eyes in shock and fear. One wave of Fang Ping, another wave of Fang Ping. Who was it this time? The small Qingyang town seemed to have become a hot steam bun, attracting people from all over. Jiang Wang also raised his sword and looked into the distance, ready for battle. He saw two figures approaching from afar, speeding over. When the figures gradually became clear, Jiang Wang revealed a smile. What appeared in front of him was a fat figure. When he landed in front of Jiang Wang, the ground seemed to shake. Only Cheng Sheng could get close to Jiang Wang so fiercely without being attacked by him. And the person following closely behind, wearing a black helmet and black armor, did not reveal his appearance. Who else could it be but 14? Why are you here? Jiang Wang asked. But as soon as the question came out, he thought of the answer. Manager Qian? Kill him. Cheng Sheng narrowed his small eyes and scanned the surroundings. He could not help but laugh. Not bad. Even Dragon Face died in your hands. He was clearly in the army and could not be easily moved. He was not even allowed to contact the outside world. But after intercepting Manager Qian, who was in a panic, and learning that Dragonbone Face had appeared in Qingyang town, he rushed over immediately. And only he and 14 were there, which meant that he was confident that the two of them were enough to kill Dragon Face, the strongest of the 12 bone faces. There's a problem inside the White Bone Path. Jiang Wang shook his head and roughly explained the situation at that time. White Bone Messenger, Zhang Linchuan. Why did he order Rabbit Face to kill Dragon Face? Cheng Sheng was thoughtful. Jiang Wang glanced at him and did not speak. Cheng Sheng's words were of course not wrong, but it undoubtedly showed that he was familiar with the White Bone Path. Why would Cheng Sheng, one of the top families in Qi, know about the evil sect in a small country thousands of miles away? Unless Qi might have already known about the White Bone Path conspiracy in the Yang country. And connecting it to the siege of Qi's army, it seemed like a clear thread of thought could be drawn. Cheng Sheng realized that he had said something wrong, but he did not explain anything. In fact, if he was not facing Jiang Wang and had let his guard down, he would not have made such a mistake. He avoided the topic and looked at the densely packed, surrendered soldiers outside the town. He asked, "What do you plan to do with these prisoners?" "What do you think?" Jiang Wang asked. "If you don't plan to..." Cheng Sheng thought for a moment. "I'll bring them back to the army and keep them in custody." Jiang Wang was naturally able to understand what he didn't say. It would be nothing more than killing them on the spot. But he did not plan to agree. He only asked about the latter option. Is it difficult? He asked this because the Qi army had only sealed off the Yang country in the name of protecting the eastern region. Other than not allowing people to enter or leave, they had not done anything else. It was clear that the Qi army had their own ideas and had been carrying them out strongly. They might not be willing to take over these prisoners. It's not difficult. Cheng Sheng shook his head. These people attacked the Zhenggenjia's property. You're just retaliating. No matter how you look at it, it makes sense. These soldiers of Jia City would inevitably become the weapons of others if they were released back. Qingyang town did not have the ability to imprison so many people. That was why Jiang Wang felt that it was difficult before. Now that Cheng Sheng said this, he said, "Then you can take them away." Cheng Sheng smiled. "I'll have to trouble you to take them back. These people have surrendered to you. I'm afraid it will be difficult for me and Sure 14 to suppress them." Jiang Wang didn't believe that he and 14 wouldn't be able to do anything to these soldiers. Therefore, Zhong Xiansheng's words must have some other meaning. Now is not the time to ask. Okay. Jiang Wang simply agreed. I'll go and take care of the affairs of Qingyang town first. He had originally planned to let Zhu Biqiong help him. Although she lacked worldly experience, she was still a transcendent being, and her injuries were lighter than before. But he did not expect that the despondent Duga Xiao would take the initiative to take over the heavy burden. "Leave it to me, master." "Ah, okay." Jiang Wang only hesitated for a moment before agreeing. Dugu Xiao had always been in charge of the affairs of Qingyang town. And at this time, she probably needed the feeling of being needed. Seeing Jiang Wang busying himself and giving instructions, Cheng Sheng blinked and did not say anything. Let's announce the book group again. Everyone is welcome to boast. Red Heart Camp, book group 8799-27532. Chapter 305. Not long after they left Qingyang town, Jiang Wang, who was at the back of the group, asked Chung Gung Sheng. Speak. Why do you want me to send the captives to the army camp? The surrendered soldiers of Jia City were very obedient and behaved themselves the entire way. At this moment, the 14 of them were leading the way in the front, while the densely packed, surrendered soldiers followed closely behind. Jiang Wang and Chung Gung Sheng were at the back of the group. We're going to see my uncle, Chung Gung Sheng said. This time, the Qi army is being commanded by your uncle? Jiang Wang was shocked. Since Xiong too had left the mountain, he couldn't possibly be a deputy. Thus, the fact that Chongxian Chu Liang was in the army right now meant that he was in charge of this operation. You'll know when we get there. Chung Gung Sheng only smiled. This fatty wasn't telling the truth, but Jiang Wang knew that he wouldn't be able to get any information out of him, so he could only let him go for now. He had just opened the heaven and earth door, so he and Chung Gung Sheng still had many things to discuss about cultivation. The two of them chatted as they sparred. Time passed quickly. Although there weren't many transcendents among the Jia City soldiers, they were all strong and healthy. They had also been tempered by military formations, so it wasn't a problem for them to move around. Chung Gung Sheng wasn't someone who cared about their physical strength, so he used their maximum speed to drive the surrendered soldiers to the border. With Chongxian Chu Liang's relationship, they didn't encounter too many obstacles and directly arrived near the commander's camp. Of course, before this, Chung Gung Sheng had already explained the situation to a high-ranking officer in the camp. That officer took over the surrendered soldiers of Jia City. When they arrived at the Qiu Offense Army's main camp, the soldiers of Jia City didn't dare to court death. Thus, although they were all exhausted, they still obediently listened to military orders. Jiang Wang had been to the Zhuang country's Maplewood City's City Guard Army many times. No matter how he looked at it, Maplewood City's City Guard Army wasn't weak. Their performance in the disaster of the White Bone Path was enough to be called brave. Although most of them died from the Earth disaster, they didn't even have the chance to fight back. At first glance, the Qiu Offense Army's camp didn't seem too far off. At most, it was just a bit bigger and there were more soldiers. But when Jiang Wang personally walked into the huge campsite and felt the murderous aura of the army, which suppressed the Tao energy in his body and made him unable to move, he finally understood what it meant to be the strongest army in the world. A group of soldiers escorted a group armies group. Among the soldiers of the Defense Army's armies, as if they were a few, they would have been a group's armies group. Zhong Xiansheng glanced at him. Oh, they're from the Shi family, he said casually. They wanted to leave Yang country, so we detained them. Then now, of course we killed them. Chung Gungsheng looked at Jiang Wang and smiled. Didn't the Shi family go after you? Jiang Wang had a strange feeling in his heart. Of course, he didn't have any feelings for the Shi family, but he did see how Shi Zichu struggled for the Shi family. He didn't expect the Shi family to fall into the hands of the Qi army. Didn't the Shi family leave a long time ago? They shouldn't be infected with the plague, right? Jiang Wang asked. The Shi family left after controlling the plague in Jia City. If there were any infected people, they shouldn't have taken them with them. When the first case of a supernatural being infected appeared, Yang country couldn't leave a single person behind. Chung Gungsheng said, including the Shi family members, they were all captured and imprisoned outside the country. You didn't think that our control over Yang country only stopped when our army was at the border, did you? Then why did you only imprison them then, but now you want to kill them? We have a good reason for this. Of course, we can't just kill the people of Yang country, Chung Gungsheng said. Jiang Wang was speechless. So what reason are we using? Tong Chu, a voice came from the front. Jiang Wang looked up and saw Chongxian Chu Liang striding over. It was completely different from what he had seen in South Distant City. The Zhongshuan Chu Liang who appeared in the army was not angry, but his eyes were not fierce, but it made people inexplicably feel cold sweat on their backs and breathless. Greetings, Grand Marshal. Jiang Wang saluted respectfully and asked with surprise, Tong Chu of the Shi family? Chongxian Chu Liang first looked at Chung Gungsheng, making the fat man lower his head like an ostrich. Then, he said to Jiang Wang, Look, the Shi family leader you killed is called Shi Zichu. Isn't he the son of Chu? There was also a previous leader called Shi Munin. Chu is in the southern mountain range. What is he after? Jiang Wang was speechless. This was a completely groundless accusation. Even though Chu was the overlord of the southern mountain range, its actual location should be southwest of Yang country. Ximyunan was already very far-fetched. Moreover, the name itself was very nonsensical. There was no point in talking about this. He was not the only one who wanted to eliminate the root of the problem. The Shi family was not the only family that was exterminated. Chongxi and Chu Yang said that they knew Chu, so it was fine even if they didn't. If it had nothing to do with Jiang Wang, he could not and did not intend to interfere. However, then what about the soldiers I brought? Jiang Wang asked Cheng Gongsheng. Cheng Gongsheng's eyes flickered. This, in the end, depends on the army, Jiang Wang asked. You can't expect me to trick them into coming here and then kill all 5,000 of them, right? You want me to let the people of Yang country go? Chongxian Chu Liang asked. Jiang Wang and Cheng Gongsheng's conversation was obviously to test Chongxian Chu Liang's attitude. Chongxian Chu Liang could tell. Therefore, he was very direct with his question. I don't dare to question Sire's strategy. Jiang Wang said sincerely, it only involves the 4,000 surrendered Jia City Guard soldiers that I brought. Chongxian Chu Liang asked lightly. Reason? Cheng Gongsheng walked between the two, wanted to say something, but Chongxian Chu Liang glared at him. He had no choice but to turn around and give Jiang Wang a meaningful glance. They are my captives, Jiang Wang said. When I accepted their surrender, I promised them that they would be spared. I am not a liar. Not in the past. Not in the future. Chongxian Chu Liang looked at him quietly and didn't say anything. He didn't say a word, didn't move, and didn't even release his aura. But that silent pressure was enough to crush him to the ground. It was only now that Jiang Wang truly felt the weight of the vicious butcher title. It was impossible to say that he wasn't nervous and uneasy, but Jiang Wang was speaking from the bottom of his heart. Even if Chongxian Chu Liang insisted on killing, he couldn't do anything about it. He saw Cheng Gongsheng as a friend because Cheng Gongsheng also saw Chongxian Chu Liang as an elder. But Chongxian Chu Liang didn't respect his reputation, so he couldn't let this matter go. It would become a knot in his heart, a thorn in his heart. Everyone's moral standards, values, and even views of the world were different and didn't need to be the same. But respect was very important. That's true. Cheng Gongsheng said, I told them in Xingyang town that I would accept them in the name of Cheng Gongsheng, and they were willing to serve me. Didn't they follow me all the way back to the camp? He forced himself to smile at Chongxian Chu Liang and said, We Zheng Genjia never lie. Chongxian Chu Liang turned a blind eye to his performance and only stared at Jiang Wang for a long time. Seeing that Jiang Wang's expression didn't change, he suddenly raised the corner of his mouth and smiled. You're right. A man should keep his word. Little Sheng should learn more from you. I don't know who he took after with that wretched look of his. Let's not kill these people. Lock them up and see where they'll be sent after the war. We Zheng Genjia can't accept such weak subordinates. These words were both a warning and a knock, but they also saved Jiang Wang's face. After that, without waiting for Jiang Wang and Cheng Gongsheng to say anything, Chongxian Chu Liang turned and left. Chapter 306. Looking at Cheng Gongsheng, Jiang Wang said apologetically, I've made things difficult for you. Chongxian Chu Liang naturally relented because of Cheng Gongsheng. Emotionally, he and Cheng Gongsheng were uncle and nephew, and in terms of benefits, he had already chosen Cheng Gongsheng in the internal struggle of the Zhenggenjia. Of course, with Chongxian Chu Liang's current position, his support was limited. If Cheng Gongsheng didn't want to improve himself, or if he was too arrogant, his support might change. After all, Yung Genzuan was his nephew. However, Cheng Gongsheng waved his hand and said, I said in Xingyang town that I wouldn't make things difficult for you, so I won't make things difficult for you. Chongxian Chu Liang heard that Jiang Wang had killed Dragon Face, so he took the time to come see him. But because of Jiang Wang's insistence, this meeting ended abruptly. Cheng Gongsheng wouldn't talk about this. There was no point in complaining about what had already happened. How about you don't go back, he said. This was a reason why he had Jiang Wang personally send the surrendered soldiers to the army camp. The appearance of Dragon Face made him realize that the danger Jiang Wang faced wasn't just limited to Jia City. However, there were some parts of the military that couldn't be said. Because of this, he didn't even call back the Zhenggenji as transcendent medical practitioner. He was determined to let him fend for himself in Qingyang town. In reality, he had already broken the military rules by bringing 14 to Qingyang town. He couldn't avoid punishment afterwards. However, forcing 5,000 soldiers to surrender could be counted as a merit, so it could offset the punishment. Jiang Wang heard and saw everything clearly. From the destruction of a Shi family to the punishment of the 5,000 surrendered soldiers of Jia City, it could be seen that the attitude of the Qi army was too cruel. From this, one could see the future of the Yang kingdom. Not a single ray of light could be seen. When the nest was overturned, no egg would remain intact. Qingyang town was inevitably shaken by the storm. However, Jiang Wang shook his head. I still want to go back to Qingyang town, not just to help you. My subordinates and friends are all there. Especially during the flying snow calamity, the people of Qingyang town could be said to have saved his life. At a time like this, he would not turn a blind eye to it. Have you decided? Cheng Gengxing asked. What's there to worry about? Jiang Wang smiled. I've just opened the heaven and earth door, and it's time for me to advance by leaps and bounds. The danger from before has passed, and it will only get safer in the future. Cheng Gengxing did not argue with him about how dangerous Yang Kingdom would be in the future. He believed that Jiang Wang had already thought it through. Therefore, he only sighed and said, Yesterday, I received news that Wang Yiwu has already broken through the limit of the reaching heaven state. If this is the previous limit, Cheng Gengxing moved his feet and took 5 steps forward. He has gone so far again. He has redefined the limit. Jiang Wang could not help but sigh. It's really admirable. Redefining the limit of a state was enough to be listed as a milestone in the extraordinary world. Even if Wang Yiwu died now, his name would be recorded in the annals of history. Even if he was an opponent, he and Cheng Gengxing could not ignore such an achievement. It was not that he did not have any regrets. Originally, he also had such an opportunity. Morning and evening classes, regardless of whether it was winter or summer, he did not slack off for a moment. He never slacked off, and his strength had been steadily increasing. Moreover, he did not reach a bottleneck, which meant that he had the opportunity to reach that limit or even break that limit. However, due to the current situation, he had to make a breakthrough in advance. But there was no need to regret it. Wang Yiwu had the protection of a war god as his master, so he could explore at ease. Jiang Wang was in a foreign country, and his body was like duckweed. It was not easy for him to struggle to survive. There was no need to blame him for everything. It was nothing more than do your best and have no regrets. Of course, it's admirable, but as an opponent, it's not so pleasant. Cheng Gengxing shook his head and said his shackles are gone, and he can push open the heaven and earth gate at will. Perhaps he has already reached the soaring dragon realm, and once he pushes open the heaven and earth gate, he will immediately become one of the strongest in the soaring dragon realm. At least, I don't have the confidence to fight him. Is his cooperation with Yun Ganzuan really so unbreakable? Jiang Wang was somewhat curious. If he pays a certain price, is it possible to turn an enemy into a friend? Even if challenging Yun Ganzuan was already such a difficult thing, if he had to face an enemy like Wang Yiwu, he could not help but worry. If Yun Ganzuan bribed you, would you agree? Cheng Gengxing said. The relationship between Wang Yiwu and Yun Ganzuan is not as simple as you think. It's even closer than yours and mine. Since Cheng Gengxing said so, it meant that splitting them up was not feasible. Jiang Wang thought for a moment and did not say anything. If they really had a fight, there was nothing to say. I have to say, it's a good thing for me that you're staying in Qingyang town, Cheng Gengxing said seriously. I've already bet all my assets on this expedition to the Yang Kingdom. Ever since he knew that the commander of the Qi army was Chongxian Chu Liangqi, Jiang Wang had already speculated in his heart. He wanted to say that Chung Gungsheng was gambling too much, but he also felt that if he did not gamble like this, he would never have a chance to win against Yunganzuan. My uncle and I have bet all our political resources. I want the entire Yang kingdom, and I want to have a share of this pie. Zhong Xiansheng's voice was soft and full of ambition as he said, "My uncle's army is outside, trapping and protecting this piece of cake. And you are inside, eating away at this pie. The better you do in Qingyang town, the clearer the ugly side of the Yang kingdom's bureaucrats. When the wind and rain are in the balance, you have to turn Qingyang town into a paradise and make it a place that all Yang people yearn for. The existence of a place like Qingyang town itself can make the people of the Yang court lose their hearts." At this moment, he revealed his goal. Jiang Wang's previous idea was to consolidate all the Zhonginjia businesses in the Yang kingdom and make them Chung Gungsheng's granary. However, Chung Gungsheng wanted more, and his goal was bigger. No matter how much he paid to let Qi send troops to the Yang kingdom and let Chongxian Chu Yang become the commander of the army, they could not take over the entire Yang kingdom, but they could have the power to divide the pie. Who to divide the pie to, who not to, who to give more, who to give less. They could easily form a network of interests. It could be said that if Chongxian Chu Yang successfully took over the Yang kingdom and took it into Qi's territory, the glory would be secondary. The opportunity to divide the pie would be the most important. It would be enough to let Chung Gungsheng's power expand. As for how much it would expand, it would depend on how it was divided. "Everything I did in Qingyang town was not an act," Jiang Wang said. "Of course I know," Chung Gungsheng said, "but you have to help me. I know what to do." As Jiang Wang spoke, he took out the heavenly clear sky goat that had shrunk by half. "This is for you, as I said before." Chung Gungsheng accepted it without hesitation. This was what he had said before. Jiang Wang left and did not stay in the military camp for long. Xiang Qian's injuries had not healed, and there were no strong people in Qingyang town, so he needed to rush back as soon as possible. He would never ask when Chung Gungsheng decided on the plan, or when he decided to stake it all on one throw and plot against the entire Yang kingdom. Had they already planned for this day when they invited him to the Yang country back then outside Ninyao City? He only needed to know that Chung Gungsheng rushed to Qingyang town as soon as he heard the news about Long Mian. That was enough. Everyone had their own ideas, principles, privacy, and secrets. Friends sought common ground while reserving differences. Chapter 307. In the commander's tent, Chongxian Chu Liang sat on a chair and looked at a huge map hanging in front of him. Chung Gungsheng stood behind him carefully and didn't make a sound. After a long time, Chongxian Chu Liang suddenly said, "Jiang Wang is indeed a talent, but he has his own ideas and principles. He won't be loyal to you without any bottom line. It's not easy to control him. What I need is not loyalty, but friends," Chung Gungsheng said. Chongxian Chu Liang thought of something, and his eyes looked complicated for a moment. Superiors don't have friends. Jiang Wang is a man of his word. He looks peaceful, but he's proud in his bones. If I only take his subordinates, I'll be creating enemies for myself. It's better to keep a distance from him. I think he actually has feelings for a place like Qingyang town. Isn't that ridiculous? On the contrary, that's what's valuable about it. Zhongshuan Sheng said, "Treacherous people, cruel and bloodthirsty people, cold-blooded people. Do we lack such people in the Zhongshuan clan? Do we lack these people in the Qi and even the whole world? They're everywhere. They're overflowing. People like Jiang Wang are precious. He's the one who can gain people's trust. It's not that he needs us, but we need someone like him who does things in the light. Other than him, who else can set up a banner in Qingyang town and win people's hearts?" "Commander, sometimes I think about it," Chung Gungsheng said. "If one day I lose everything and can only face Yunganzuan with nothing, then who will stand by my side? 14th Prince will definitely do it. Jiang Wang should also do it. Other than him, I can't think of a second person who should do it. You ask me why I support him so much. This is the reason." Chongxian Chu Liang listened and neither agreed nor disagreed. Instead, he changed the topic and asked, "What do you think of Zhang Yong?" The Phoenix Spirit Zhang family massacre case was ordered by the 11th Prince to investigate thoroughly. Blue Metal Constable Lin Yuxi was specifically in charge of the case. The culprit is at the Inner Mansion realm, and his identity is unknown. Sheng did not mention Zhang Yong directly. Instead, he talked about the Inner Palace stage expert who annihilated the entire Phoenix Immortal Zhang clan. He didn't fight with the Blue Metal Constable, which means that he was afraid of exposing his background. He committed suicide as soon as he was discovered. This meant that he had long been prepared to sacrifice himself. He was not even afraid of death, but he was afraid of exposing his roots. This meant that what he was plotting was far greater than his own life and death. Above life and death, there was either love or hatred. I'm more inclined to the latter. Chong Xian and Chu Liang did not say anything. Cheng Sheng continued, "The martial arts that have been handed down from generation to generation have long been lost. There are even nameless weapons left. Not much of their property is left. What did the Zhang family of Fengxian County have that was worth such a scheme? No matter how I think about it, there's only this once glorious surname of Phoenix Spirit Zhang. It seems that there are no loopholes left, but this matter itself is a loophole. Let Zhang Yong follow the 11th Prince. I don't plan to steal this talent." At this point, Chong Xian and Chu Liang nodded. "You're quite experienced in judging people and situations. Because of this, I can trust your choice a little. However, you can't escape punishment for violating military law. Go and receive 100 strokes of the military rod." In the army, Sheng did not dare to be mischievous. He only saluted seriously and lifted the curtain to leave. After breaking through to the soaring dragon realm, one had the ability to tread on the void and fly. This alone had greatly increased one's combat space and enriched one's combat options. And with a high-quality escape technique like the Flame Meteor, Jiang Wang left behind the burden and returned to Qingyang Town in a short time. With the might of a great victory and the virtue of fighting against the epidemic, the entire Qingyang Town could be said to be united as one. Jiang Wang's orders were carried out smoothly. One of the things that Cheng Gongxing asked him to help with was to collect evidence related to the Four Seas Business Alliance's crimes in Jia City. In the current situation, this was very simple. Although Manager Qian fled to the border in a panic, he was killed by Cheng Gongsheng after finding out about Long Mian's whereabouts. A few transcendents of the Four Seas Business Alliance also died at the hands of the White Bone Path, but a few warriors survived. To be honest, the so-called evidence of what the Four Seas Business Alliance had done in the entire Yang country during this period of time did not require much effort to collect. There were plenty of them. There was no need to talk about these trivial matters. In short, the situation in Qingyang Town was settled. As for the two previous castellans of Jia City, Jiang Wang killed the new castellan, Shi Jing, who was a subordinate of the Rizhao prefectural governor, Song Guang. Song Guang's attitude was very cautious. But looking at the current situation, Qi's higher-ups were probably in a terrible fix. It was very difficult for them to have the time to deal with a small Qingyang town. The White Bone Path behind Long Mian was undoubtedly the most dangerous point, but Long Mian's death was largely due to Rabbit Mian's sneak attack. The internal problems of the White Bone Path would probably make it difficult for their high-level combatants to leave. As for the White Bone Path's Holy Lord, Cheng Gongsheng had revealed that Chong Xian and Chu Liang had been paying attention to him for a long time. In short, there was danger, but there were also opportunities. Jiang Wang's decision to stay in Qingyang Town was not entirely out of impulse. In the room in front of him, he was lying on the bed with his arms and legs spread out. He looked like he could lie there until the end of time. When Jiang Wang walked in, he did not even move his eyes. He only said weakly, "I thought you wouldn't come back." "Why do you say that?" Jiang Wang sat by the bed and turned the fruit platter. "What's your relationship with that fatty? Fellow disciple? Friend?" Jiang Wang took a pear, thought for a moment, and replied, "Friend, and also business partner. He should have stopped you." Xiang Qian's whole body seemed to be moving, only his mouth. He doesn't look like a soft-hearted person, although he looks harmless. Jiang Wang bent his finger and flicked the pear. The pear and core fell off automatically, leaving only the white and clean flesh in his hand. You're right. He took a bite and let the juice of the snow pear flow in his mouth. He said with some satisfaction, but I said I would come back. Ah! Xiang Qian suddenly yelled with some anger. Ah! Jiang Wang ate the pear and was puzzled. Shouldn't fruit be eaten by injured people? If you want to eat it, peel it yourself. Did I stop you? Jiang Wang asked. Xiang Qian raised his head as if he wanted to get up, but he lay down again. Forget it. Public morals are deteriorating day by day, and people's hearts are not what they used to be. I've known that for a long time. Jiang Wang finished the fruit in 2 or 3 mouthfuls, then said, Don't worry. In Qingyang town, there shouldn't be anyone who can understand your sword formation. I'll tell Zhu Biqiong to forget about it, and I'll make Zhang Hai swear a blood oath. As for my friend, he won't say anything. The only thing you need to consider is that if Rabbit Face escapes, not only will she not hide it for you, she might even exaggerate your strength. Xiang Qian hesitated for a long time because he was worried about his sword formation being leaked. To be honest, Jiang Wang was also very curious about this sword formation that could let him, who was in the Soaring Dragon realm, have the killing power of an Intermansion realm cultivator. But it clearly involved Xiang Qian's biggest secret. If he didn't want to say, he definitely wouldn't ask. As for why his attitude towards Zhu Biqiong and Zhang Hai was different, the two's performance in the previous battle was the reason. Although Zhang Hai's strength was indeed weak, he was still slacking off a bit too much. Even Dugu Xiao dared to make a move against the rabbit-faced man. Zhang Hai was a transcendent cultivator, but from start to finish, he had only killed a few Jia city guards. To put it bluntly, after this battle, Zhang Hai had already lost Jiang Wang's trust and was no longer in the circle. Even if he didn't immediately leave, he would slowly drift away. Xiang Qian thought for a moment. The white bone path might not be able to see through it. Rabbit Face's sneak attack on Dragon Face indicated that there was a problem within the white bone path. As for Rabbit Face herself, she naturally concealed it as much as she could. It was normal for her to exaggerate Xiang Qian's flying sword and to pin his hopes on the white bone path's ignorance. It could only be said that Xiang Qian was used to running away. Although his strength could be considered strong, there were many times when he didn't want to directly face problems. You'd better prepare for the worst, Jiang Wang said. The worst? Xiang Qian closed his eyes, not speaking again. Chapter 308. Solipsistic Sword Dao, Peak of the 3 Consummate Flying Swords. After leaving Qian Xiang's residence, Jiang Yin said in the Connecting Heaven Palace, in the battle against Long Mian, he had repeatedly asked to replace Jiang Wang. Although he acted as if he did not want Jiang Wang to die in battle, he probably knew that he had once again aroused Jiang Wang's disgust and wariness. Having experienced so much, Jiang Wang would never entrust his life to someone else, especially someone of unknown origin like Jiang Yin. He did not have the habit of chatting before. Now that he spoke, it was probably for the sake of easing their relationship. At the same time, it was not without a reason to show his value. A wide range of knowledge was a rare value in itself. Peak of the 3 Consummate Flying Swords. Jiang Wang could not help but be curious about the flying sword art that Qian Xiang used to fight against Intermansion experts. The cultivation world has undergone many changes in its development to the present day. I don't know which era it was, but in short, it was in a modern world, not as far back as the late ancient era. Jiang Yin sighed. That was the era of the flying sword art. Jiang Wang understood the concept of era, although he knew almost nothing about the dusty history. Countless years had passed before the modern world. The sages of the past had roughly divided it into 4 eras: the ancient era, the middle ancient era, and the late ancient era. These 4 eras spanned an enormous span of time, and each of them could be subdivided into several smaller eras. The division of eras was not limited to time, events, politics, and culture, but they were all recognized. For example, the late ancient era that Jiang Yin spoke of included the era of saints, the era of first truth, and so on. As for the modern world, it started from the first year of the Taoist calendar, and it had been 3,918 years. Of course, this first year of the Taoist calendar marked the beginning of a new era, but it did not represent the history of Taoism. The history of the 100 schools of saints had to be traced back to even earlier times. The so-called first year of the Taoist calendar was more like the beginning of the Taoist calendar. Returning to Zhang Yan's words, the three consummate flying swords appeared in these 3,918 years of history, and once belonged to a certain era. Jiang Wang asked, "Are you saying that the flying sword art that Xiang Qian has cultivated is the peak of the three skills of flying sword?" In the era of flying sword techniques, there were three great sword Taoists that stood at the peak of the era. Jiang Yan said, "The solipsistic way of the sword that Qian Qian cultivates is one of them. His background is not simple. You have to be careful. If it was the way of the sword that was said to be the pinnacle of the era, then it was not that hard to understand why he could rely on it to fight against intermansion stage experts. Even for the way of the sword, which had once stood at the peak of an era, Fang Qiu's performance should be considered unsatisfactory. Perhaps there were some unforeseen circumstances, or perhaps there was some disappointment after being passed on to the present, or perhaps Jiang Wang did not comment on his reminder. Instead, he asked warily, "Is this also the knowledge you inherited from the white-bone evil god? Don't underestimate the white-bone god." Jiang Yan's tone was meaningful. Even if there is a temporary victory or defeat, you must always remember that he is an almost immortal god of the netherworld. It was not so much a warning to Jiang Wang, but more like a warning to himself. He said, "Although I am only the result of the white-bone god's temporary influence, the information I have access to is as vast as the sea. You can't imagine what kind of world it is." "You mean Du Ruhui's victory is not worth mentioning?" Jiang Wang asked. "In the short term, it could be considered great. But when they reach the end of their lifespan, if we're still alive at that time, you will know how insignificant this wave is in the long river of time." Jiang Wang could not deny it. Just the words "third peak of the flying sword" made him feel the vastness and greatness of history. Today, of course, there were still cultivators who practiced flying sword techniques, but he had never heard of the so-called third peak of the flying sword. The peerless swordsmanship that had once stood at the pinnacle of the era had now become nameless. What a great power time was! In the palace of Zhaoheng City, Yang Jianda rubbed the letter in his hand and finally threw it on the desk. This was already the third one. Lu Huai, the eunuch, stood to the side and whispered, "Your Majesty." He didn't come after 3 requests. Chongxian Chu Yang has made up his mind and will not come. Yang Jianda stood up and walked out. At first, he was still weak, but after 1 step, he was already with his hands behind his back. After 2 steps, he actually raised his head. After 3 steps, he was full of energy. Raise the imperial edict. He walked forward with his hands behind his back. "Old man Jiang has bullied me too much. The country is unstable and the country is in danger. I summon the world to help the king. Raise the soldiers of the Yang kingdom. I want to fight with the enemy within the country's borders. Raise another imperial edict and give it to Chongxian Chu Yang. If he does not accept the letter of surrender, he will accept the letter of challenge." 30 years ago, the winner was not decided. 30 years later, we will decide life and death. Rumble. Thunder sounded outside the palace, and rain poured down. On the last day of July, the king of the Yang kingdom finally gave up all his fantasies and decided to fight. Even if this might be the result that Chongxian Chu Yang was waiting for. The Yang kingdom was a country that had worshipped its ancestors for dozens of generations. Even if its territory was getting smaller day by day due to various reasons, its borders were still very long. The Qiu offense army sealed the borders of the Yang kingdom and naturally could not rely on the soldiers themselves. Arrays were the main means of confinement. On the entire border of the Yang kingdom, small arrays were formed every 10 miles and connected every 100 miles. They were all interconnected and affected each other. In the end, The core of the main array fell into the commander's tent and was personally guarded by Chongxian Chu Yang. The other countries that bordered the Yang kingdom tacitly kept silent about this. Of course, everyone knew that without the lips, the teeth would feel cold. But it was not an exaggeration to say that an ant was trying to shake a tree. Take the Rong kingdom as an example. The general stationed in Luiguang City, Jing Yi, was one of the few hardliners. He was the one who first exposed the plague in the Yang kingdom to the entire eastern region. He was not afraid of the Yang kingdom's possible revenge. However, in the face of Qi's inexplicable occupation of the borders of the Rong and Yang kingdoms and setting up arrays, he did not say anything other than quietly reorganizing the army as a precaution. This was not only his personal attitude, but also the attitude of the entire Rong kingdom's imperial court. Why was Qi the undisputed overlord of the eastern region? Why was he able to occupy the most fertile and resource-rich land in the entire eastern region? This was not a matter of public opinion. It was a position that was won through battle after battle. In the entire eastern region, which country had not been defeated by Qi, the Xia kingdom, which was at the peak of its power and influence, was still holed up in the southern region and did not dare to look towards the northeast for 30 years. Also on this day, in Guiding Light City, a woman with a graceful figure walked into an ordinary inn. Everyone in the inn stared at her. She was dressed so tightly in autumn, but she gave off an extremely seductive feeling. The black veil covering her face could not hide her mesmerizing eyes. P.S. A corner of the world seemed to have been lifted. Chapter 309. Redtail County. The sacred lord of the White Bone Path stood in a forest with his eyes wide open and his mouth slightly agape. In the entire Yang country, all the infectious gases after the death of the host gathered here together with the Qi of death. Later on, even the infectious gases on the living were included. However, although the infectious gases were removed, they inevitably took away a part of the life force. The infectious gases gathered here from all directions. When they reached this forest, they seemed to have substance. They had a tangible color and form. They were pale white smoke. The pale white smoke surged toward the sacred lord of the White Bone Path, like a swallow returning to the forest. It entered his body through his nose, eyes, mouth, and ears. This scene was so strange. There was no expression on his face. It was hard to tell whether he was happy or in pain. There was thunder in the sky, but the rain did not fall. It was as if the water droplets gathered in the clouds were afraid of something and did not dare to fall. The rabbit-faced man knelt not far away and reported the death of Dragon Face and Monkey Face. Although the young man from Maplewood City of the Zhuang country was only in the soaring dragon realm, his combat power was very strong. He had an army of 5,000 men under his command. When the two of them combined, they were actually on par with Long Mian. There was also a man who cultivated the flying sword technique. Originally, Long Mian was entangled with him, and it was difficult to tell who would win. However, when he activated the flying sword formation, his combat power suddenly increased, and he actually killed Long Mian with one sword strike. It was unknown if the sacred lord of the White Bone Path heard it. However, if he did not interrupt, the rabbit-faced man did not dare to stop. At that time, Dragon Face ordered me to kill his subordinates. I killed 2 transcendents, but when I turned around, Monkey Face was already dead. The man who used the flying sword immediately attacked Dragon Face. I went to help him, but was forced to retreat. Dragon Face asked me to leave first and come back to ask for help. However, when I was halfway, he was already... Get lost. The rabbit-faced man stopped talking and looked up in shock. The sacred lord of the White Bone Path did not speak again. However, the pale white smoke became more turbulent. The rabbit-faced man seemed to have just reacted. He hurriedly got up, turned around, and flew away. After flying out of the forest, the pale white smoke did not reveal its tracks. At least, it was hard to see with the naked eye. He probably did not need to hide in the forest. Was it because of the lifeless formation? Rabbit Face thought slowly in his heart. If I were you, I wouldn't make up such a stupid reason. A voice suddenly sounded in his ear. The rabbit-faced woman's eyes were about to turn red, but before that, she forcefully restrained herself. She turned her head in fear and saw Lu Yin with her eyes closed. She heaved a sigh of relief, but in the next moment, she said with some apprehension, "I don't understand what you mean." Lu Yin didn't want to talk too much about it. Instead, she said, "The sacred leader is hiding something from us." "Well, what?" Lu Yin faced the direction of the forest, her eyes still closed. He did want to create the incarnation of the plague, but not out of thin air. Instead, he used the shattered power of the nation as a furnace and the plague and death aura as flames to directly refine the Taoist body. In this way, the situation between him and Wang Zhangji would be reversed, and they would be able to devour him in an instant. He's not completely ignorant of the situation in the Yang Kingdom. He's even aware that there's a military expert eyeing him from outside the borders. But he didn't care. I only understood this problem after making a trip to the Yang Kingdom's capital. The rabbit-faced woman trembled with fear, but she was still very cautious. "Elder, what are you talking about?" Although she heard it clearly, she didn't dare to believe it. For so many years, hadn't Lu Yin always been the greatest defender of the Whitebone sect and was loyal to the Whitebone god? Previously, the layout in Maplewood City was his plan, and he had been actively planning for the revival of the Whitebone sect. For the advent of the Whitebone era, he could be said to have worked his heart out. But now, it seemed like Lu Yin couldn't be bothered to watch her act. She said directly, "Don't go through the Whitebone sect. Find a way to tell Zhang Linchuan that the plan has changed." Then, without another word, she turned and flew away. Only then did the rabbit-faced woman know that her envoy and the only remaining elder in the sect had a tacit understanding. At that moment, thunder rumbled in the sky, and rain was about to fall. Under the dark clouds, there was only an old man flying with his eyes closed. In the entire Yang Kingdom, it was raining heavily in Hingyang County. The rain was about to fall in Redtail County, and the sky was still clear in Rizhao County. There should have been a rain at the border of Qiyang, but it was dispersed early. In Chongxian Chu Yang's camp, a big shot was welcomed. He was the first deacon of the Four Seas Business Alliance. His surname was Qian, and his name was Fu. In the entire Four Seas Business Alliance, there were only 12 first deacons. For Fu Miao, his intermansion realm cultivation was enough for him to do whatever he wanted in many places and be treated as an important guest. Of course, his identity as a first deacon was more important than his cultivation. It was also because of his identity as the first deacon of the Four Seas Commerce Alliance that even before the battle, Zhongshuan Chuyang still took the time to meet him. "Commander Chongxian." As soon as Fu Miao entered the tent, he bowed and asked directly, "I am here to ask the Grand Marshal, when can the people and goods of the Four Seas Business Alliance be returned to Qi territory?" "How about 3 days later?" Chongxian Chu Liang asked. Fu Miao was surprised that Xiong Tu was so easy to talk to, but he naturally attributed it to the strength of the Four Seas Business Alliance. The ancient Four Seas Business Alliance had always held a lot of weight in Qi, and the various powers would give them some face. This was very normal. Qinba looked proudly at the generals on his left and right in the tent. Smiling, he said, "Marshal's words are like 10,000 mountains collapsing. I will accept the order. Although 3 days is a huge loss to our business alliance, but to show our respect to Commander Chongxian, we are willing to show our sincerity." "Then let's go." Chongxian Chu Yang waved his hand. 3 days later, we will come back to collect the corpses." Fu Miao's expression changed. "Commander, you." After all, he knew who he was facing. He took in a few deep breaths and forced out, "Commander, please don't joke." Chongxian Chu Yang looked at him calmly. "There are no jokes in the army. Who is joking with you?" "Commander," Fu Miao controlled himself. "What crime did the Four Seas Business Alliance commit? The people you have in the camp are all Qi people. They are innocent and have no evil. Can you kill them just because you say so?" At this time, a voice interrupted. "Mr. Fu is asking, What crime did the Four Seas Business Alliance commit? It was a fatty who looked a lot like Chongxian Chuliang, at least in the shape of his face and body. Of course, the reason why they looked alike was because they had the same squinted eyes that seemed to carry a natural smile. Mr. Chongxian. Fu Miao naturally recognized this young master who had been in the limelight this year in Zhenggenjia. Especially Cheng Geng-sheng, who had made friends in Handan this year, had shown his face on many occasions. But facing Cheng Geng-sheng, Fu Miao did not need to be so restrained. He asked him politely, "What do you want to say?" Cheng Geng-sheng did not seem to be angry at all. He only smiled and said, "Mr. Fu, I have a question for you. When the vassal state was attacked, the people of Qi sacrificed their homes to relieve the disaster, and even donated a large amount of resources to the Four Seas Business Alliance. Was it for you to sell at high price?" When he said this, Fu Miao's face froze. Meanwhile, Zhong Xiansheng was still slowly asking, "Could it be that the kindness and kindness of the people of the Qi kingdom is all for the sake of your vast wealth?" "Why do you say that, Mr. Chongxian?" Fu Miao said reluctantly. The Four Seas Business Alliance's actions in Yang were all for disaster relief. Yang Ting was also very supportive of it. Although you have sealed off the Yang court and mobilized soldiers, you can't erase the contributions of the Four Seas Business Alliance, right? As he spoke, his thoughts became clear. He turned to Chongxian Chuliang and changed his tone. "Military is a matter of national importance. This Qin shouldn't have asked, but there's something I have to say. Commander, isn't the Four Seas Business Alliance a Qi Business Alliance? Isn't the Four Seas Business Alliance a Qi Business Alliance member? Before you mobilized, did you consider the interests of the people of Qi? Your army has surrounded the border, and the Four Seas Business Alliance has suffered heavy losses. The few honorary deacons are very dissatisfied." Everyone knew that the honorary managers of the Four Seas Business Alliance were all members of the royal family. Fu Miao brought them up at this time to put pressure on them. But Chongxian Chuliang only smiled. "Oh, who is unhappy with me? Let him say it in front of me." Chapter 310. Chongxian, Chuliang, and Cheng Geng-sheng had poured in all their political resources to besiege the Yang kingdom. Although it was in accordance with the Qi emperor's wishes, it was only possible because of Cheng Geng-sheng's desperate efforts. After the Tianfu mystic territory, he had made friends in Handan and built up his power. He had used the name of Fighting Yungunzuan for the position of Zhenggenjia to make friends with many of Yungunzuan's rivals. Then, he had once again invested all his accumulated wealth on the gambling table. He had relied on his understanding of the Qi emperor's desire for the eastern region, and the opportunity had been the plague in the Yang kingdom. Jiang Wang did not ask Cheng Geng-sheng when he had such a big idea about the Yang kingdom, because there were some things that should not be said, even if they were friends. Cheng Geng-sheng had his own ambitions, and so did Jiang Wang. Just like Cheng Geng-sheng, he would not ask what Jiang Wang wanted to do by using himself and not Cheng Geng-sheng as the core. In fact, when Pig Face had started spreading the plague, Cheng Geng-sheng's shadow guards had already found out about it. The shadow guards that had just been formed were sent to the Yang kingdom for two reasons. One was to train them, and the other was to help organize the Yang kingdom's commercial resources. It was only after knowing that the White Bone Path had spread the plague that Cheng Geng-sheng decided to increase the stakes. Before the troops were deployed, it was a top secret among top secrets. Anyone who leaked it would be killed. Therefore, not only did he not leak any information to Jiang Wang, but even the powerful Four Seas Business Alliance did not know about it. The only people who knew about this, other than the Qi Emperor's military and political officials, were those who had been involved in this matter. Because of this attack on the Yang kingdom was not only a gamble by Cheng Geng-sheng, but also Chongxian Chuliang's political power. Chongxian Chuliang would not allow anyone to question him. Whoever stood in his way was his enemy. Fu Miao's words, regardless of the reason, had angered him. As long as he dared to say a name, that person would have to pay the price, regardless of whether he was a duke or a marquis. The 9 honorary deacons of the Four Seas Trading Alliance all had noble titles and were members of noble families. But if they dared to question Xiong Tu, one would die, two would die. If all 9 of them came, Cheng Xian-chu would die as well. Of course, I'm not unhappy with you. Fu Miao and Geng, the Four Seas Business Alliance's history, and we have done our best for the country and its peoples. Over the years, the Four Seas Business Alliances is Chu Yang, the Four Seas Business Alliance. Previously, we helped the Yang Kingdom because of the support of the country's policies. But now, the situation has changed, and all our previous investments have gone down the drain. This is something that the Business Alliance cannot bear. Of course, the flow of the sea will not change because of a drop of water. The country's affairs have nothing to do with the people. Although we have suffered heavy losses, the Four Seas Business Alliance will accept it. But Fu Miao carefully looked at Cheng Xian Chu Liang's expression. Commander, why are you making things difficult for the Four Seas Business Alliance? Why do you want us to sweat and bleed? Mr. Fu, if you don't know, you don't have to ask. I'll answer you, Zhong Xiansheng said from the side. Slowly and clumsily, he turned around and took a thick stack of papers from 14's arms. Then, he raised it up high and smashed it in front of Fu Miao. See for yourself. Fu Miao only needed to glance at it to know that it was the Four Seas Business Alliance's secret account. The Four Seas Business Alliance had 2 sets of accounts regarding the plague relief business in the Yang Kingdom. One set was on the surface, and it was done to satisfy the officials of the Yang Kingdom. The other was the secret account, and it was only for the higher-ups of the Business Alliance to check. In fact, the reason why he had rushed to the military camp personally was to protect the secret account. But he did not expect that Cheng Gengsheng would get his hands on it in such a short time. The Four Seas Business Alliance vowed to save the Yang Kingdom, and with all sorts of promises, you gained the trust of the Yang Kingdom and the Qi Kingdom, and took on the responsibility of transporting resources to help the Yang Kingdom fight against the plague. Cheng Gengsheng scolded. And you actually sold the people of Qi at a high price in the Yang Kingdom. You caused the Yang Kingdom to be unable to provide relief, and the plague worsened. You also caused the Qi to have no choice but to deploy troops to stop the plague from spreading to the east. But because of this, the whole world and the Yang Kingdom are suspicious. Fu Miao, does the Four Seas Business Alliance know your crime? When Cheng Gengsheng first said that the Four Seas Business Alliance had made a fortune from the plague, Fu Miao did not react much. But when he heard the last few sentences, he was shocked. The Zheng people were pushing the responsibility of deploying troops to the Four Seas Business Alliance. They were also directing the hatred of the Yang Kingdom to the Four Seas Business Alliance. This is ridiculous, Fu Miao said angrily. Do you still want to see the evidence? Cheng Gengsheng asked. Following his question, 14 carried a big box out of nowhere, walked over, and placed it in front of Fu Miao. Open it. Cheng Gengsheng looked at Fu Miao and said, the evidence of the Four Seas Business Alliance raising prices and the complaints of the Yang Kingdom's people against the Four Seas Business Alliance. All the evidence is in here. Fu Miao, why don't you open it and take a look? This evidence was naturally collected by Jiang Wang. Fu Miao knew that it was useless to argue. Cheng Gengsheng was obviously well prepared. He ignored him and said directly to Cheng Xian Chuliang, Commander, even if the Four Seas Business Alliance had made some mistakes, it was in the Yang Kingdom, not in the Qi Kingdom. Even if it was wrong, it was the other country that was hurt. Why should we make things difficult for the Qi Kingdom? The Four Seas Business Alliance is willing to donate 100,000 Dao Yuan stones. We only hope that the commander will win. Chongxian Chuliang did not say anything. However, Zhong Xiansheng suddenly turned around and asked, Is this a bribe? Young Master Chongxian. Fu Miao stared at him angrily. Is it because I refuse to see you in Handan? Must you go to this extent? When Cheng Gengsheng won the Tian Fu mystic territory, he went straight to Handan, wanted to make a name for himself in the imperial capital. At the start, the situation was difficult and he was rejected by many people. Fu Miao was one of them. Firstly, The Four Seas Business Alliance was a big business and didn't really care about a fatty like Zhong Xiansheng, who had risked his life to climb up the ranks. Secondly, between Cheng Geng-sheng and Yunganzuan, they felt that Cheng Geng-sheng had no chance at all. They were not willing to waste any money on him. Even when Cheng Geng-sheng went to Nanyao City and defeated the Qi Prince Jiang Wuyong, he was in the limelight. When he returned to Handan, many people were chasing after him. Fu Miao's view did not change. He thought that although Chongxian Chu-liang expressed his support for Cheng Geng-sheng, it was just the love of an elder for a junior. His own would not be affected by Cheng Geng-sheng. But today, he realized that not only could Cheng Geng-sheng influence Chongxian Chu-liang, he could even represent him. Just like now, for the Four Seas Business Alliance, this situation greatly changed their evaluation of Cheng Geng-sheng. But now, the most important thing was to get out of this quagmire. No matter what, the Four Seas Business Alliance could not become the cause of war between the two countries. They could not bear the responsibility that Cheng Geng-sheng wanted to put on them. Sorry, I don't remember this. Faced with Fu Miao's questioning, Cheng Geng-sheng only said indifferently, "Everything I say and do is out of fairness. The way the commander does things is even more so. It's fine if you suspect me, but how can you suspect the commander?" "No, that's not what I meant." Fu Miao felt that he could not defend himself, but he still forced himself to say, "Commander Chongxian Chu-liang, our alliance leader is very concerned about this matter. Please consider it carefully." At this moment, Chongxian Chu-liang, who had been watching Cheng Geng-sheng's performance, could not help but laugh. "You're using your alliance leader to pressure me again?" The laughter suddenly stopped. "You insulted me again and again. You should have cut out your tongue. In order for you to pass on a message to your alliance leader, you'll use your left ear instead. When you return, why don't you ask him for me?" Chongxian Chu-liang said indifferently. "What can he do to me?" Chapter 3:11. Seeing that he was going to be punished, Fu Miao was shocked and angry. He did not dare to target Chongxian Chu-liang. He looked around and said, "The Four Seas Business Alliance is the top trading company in Qi. I am the Business Alliance's first deacon. Who dares to touch me?" Dong! The sound of boots stepping on the ground could be heard. Several sounds merged into one. The generals in the tent all took a step forward. Fu Miao's threat did not have any effect in the Qiu Offense Army's commander's tent. Threatening Chongxian Chu-liang in front of him was a sign that he was at a loss. Putting aside the fact that all the generals were eager to give it a try, Zhong Xuansheng was the first to take a step forward and kneel down. "Commander, I beg for your orders." Chongxian Chu-liang only raised his hand to show his agreement. Cheng Geng-sheng stood up and faced Fu Miao. His Dao energy surged. "Cheng Geng-sheng." Fu Miao gritted his teeth and shouted. It was going to be an exciting battle between the intermansion experts of the Soaring Dragon Battle Arena. However, Cheng Geng-sheng only casually pulled out a blade from his waist. He did not condense any Dao energy. His footsteps were even a little light. His fat body could be said to have difficulty walking. He walked lightly toward Fu Miao. "Once the military order is given, it will be hard to change it. I have no choice." He flicked his blade. "You can escape, run, and even resist. However," he said, "think about the consequences." Cheng Geng-sheng's voice was not loud. It sounded like he was chatting casually, but it was very clear. "Especially since you are an intermansion realm expert. I just opened the heaven and earth door. Don't be careless and kill me when you resist." He walked slowly toward Fu Miao. This period of time was enough for a transcendent cultivator like Fu Miao to escape the tent hundreds of times. Especially Chongxian Chu-liang, who was leaning lazily on the commander's seat. It looked like he did not intend to interfere. Even if he resisted, Xiong Tu would not do anything now. However, for some reason, even Fu Miao himself did not know why. It was as if his feet were rooted to the ground. He could not move. He had endless energy, but it seemed like he could not use it. He clearly had the battle prowess to destroy mountains and fill seas, but he had disappeared without a trace. In the end, they could only watch as Chung Gungsheng walked over, tap, 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 the tapping of boots on the ground. The voice finally reached its end, and the person's fat figure was already in front of him. And then, with a clean swipe of the blade, a bloody ear flew up. After covering the wound, Fu Mao seemed to have woken up from a dream and felt the pain. Hiss! He sucked in a breath of cold air and staggered a few more times before he managed to stand firm, even though the Jubao merchants had caught up. However, at least for now, Qi's #1 Chamber of Commerce was still the Four Seas Business Alliance. There were only 12 first-grade deacons in a merchant association of this scale, and Fu Miao was one of them. In terms of status, he was only below the honorary deacon and the alliance master. In terms of real power, he was even more important than the honorary deacon. When had he ever suffered such humiliation? When had he ever been treated like this? He had actually been crippled in front of everyone. However, other than sucking in a breath of cold air, Fu Miao could not make any other sound. In Xiong Tu's tent, he seemed to have lost the strength to even speak. Chongxian Chu Liang raised his hand again, indicating that he could leave. Chung Gungsheng waved his hand, and the long blade that he borrowed quickly returned to its scabbard. Then, he personally lifted the curtain of the tent and said, "Please." Fu Miao covered his injured ear and walked out in a daze. Chung Gungsheng said, "Remember to send someone to collect the corpse in 3 days." These 3 days were not for him. It was for the alliance master of the Four Seas Business Alliance. Chongxian Chuliang had made it clear that he wanted to execute the people of the Four Seas Business Alliance who were still locked up in the military camp. He had also given the alliance master 3 days to do whatever he wanted. He wanted to see if he could block his butcher's knife. Such a silent attitude. How arrogant. Whether the people of the Four Seas Business Alliance were willing or not, they were definitely going to be the scapegoat. To Chung Gungsheng, attacking Yunganzuan was something that he would spare no effort to do. Since the Four Seas Business Alliance had cooperated with Yunganzuan, he would cut off their hands whenever he had the chance. Especially since the Four Seas Business Alliance had rashly entered the Yang country. They were already full of lice. It would be a pity if they did not catch them. As for the benefits that they could get from the Four Seas Business Alliance, the Jubao merchants would give them 10 times the amount. When the Four Seas Business Alliance won the Yang country's plague cure business, they were elated. However, they did not expect that the Jubao merchants would be secretly delighted. This was a trap in itself. From the start, the Jubao merchants had no intention of competing. Their exasperation after losing was just an act. The Four Seas Business Alliance had been the #1 business alliance in Qi for a long time. The Jubao merchants and Chung Gungsheng immediately hit it off and invested large amounts of resources into Chongshuan's Chu Yang army. Of course, it was not because they loved Qi. Using this opportunity to beat the Four Seas Business Alliance was the most important thing. After a long period of hard work, the Jubao merchants had finally caught up. They started to seek a position that was commensurate with their strength. Fu Miao did not know about this deal before she came. She would have thought about it after she returned. But for a battle of this level, it was probably too late. Whether it was the contempt they had for the Jubao merchants or their reckless actions in Yang country, it was clear that the Four Seas Business Alliance was arrogant. And this business alliance with the longest history in Qi was now paying the price for their arrogance. Who knew how many people would live, how many would die, and how much blood would be spilled? In Xingyang town, Jiang Wang was cultivating. Whenever he could squeeze out some free time, he would cultivate. Although there was a saying that cultivation does not matter how long it takes, the effort he put in would not let him down. After opening the heaven and earth door, the heaven-connecting palace seemed to have reached the heavens. Vast amounts of heaven and earth yuan qi were constantly pouring into the Milky Way whirlpool, being washed by it and fed back to his fleshly body. Naturally, there was a large amount of Tao energy being produced. The speed was naturally much faster than before. Before opening the heaven and earth door, the yuan qi that was washed by the Tao vortex was produced by the physical body. After opening the heaven and earth door, the Tao vortex could communicate directly with heaven and earth. The efficiency had doubled. In other words, the 9 starry river vortexes produced 81 balls of Tao energy a day. Now, they could produce 162 balls of Tao energy. After the star-twining spirit snake evolved into the star-twining python, the amount of Tao energy it could produce increased from 3 to 10 balls. The quality of the Tao energy also increased. Moreover, the star-twining python was more intelligent. It could produce Tao energy on its own and no longer needed Jiang Wang to control it. Regarding intelligence, there was an obvious example. The star-twining spirit snake would often instinctively approach the netherworld candle, perhaps attracted by some kind of aura. It needed Jiang Wang to secretly restrain it. After the Tao vein true spirit evolved into the star-twining python, not only did it not get close to the netherworld candle, but it also showed a certain degree of territorial awareness and tried to expel the netherworld candle many times. It only stopped after Jiang Wang restrained it. The star-twining python was very diligent. It would automatically produce Tao energy at least twice a day. It was probably because of Jiang Wang's persistent morning and evening classes that it had developed a habit. In this way, after reaching the heaven-connecting realm, Jiang Wang's heaven-connecting palace produced 182 balls of Tao energy every day, which was equivalent to the production of 2 Tao energy stones. Even if he did not dare to do anything every day, he could still make a small fortune by simply injecting Tao energy stones. Now he could cancel the morning and evening classes to cultivate his Tao energy. But to Jiang Wang, it was nothing more than changing the content of the morning and evening classes. He changed the routine of Tao energy-breaking meridians to the exploration of the Sea of Torso. The Sea of Spine was also known as the Heaven-Connecting Palace, and the Sea of Torso was known as the 5 Viscera Palaces. Some people also called it the 5 Palaces Sea, meaning that the 5 palaces were all in it. The isolated island of heaven and earth floated in the 5 Palaces Sea. The sea below it was vast and endless, and the fog above it was boundless. It was as if there was only one island between heaven and earth. The name, Isolated Island of Heaven and Earth, was appropriate. Before entering the realm, people would often misunderstand that the 5 palaces of the inner mansion realm were the 5 viscera of the human body. This conjecture was incorrect. The 5 palaces did correspond to the 5 viscera of the human body to a certain extent, but in the Sea of Torso, their positions did not correspond. Not to mention the boundless Sea of Torso, it was impossible to correspond to the position of the physical body. Even if it could be barely matched, if one searched for the inner mansion according to the corresponding position of one of the viscera of the human body, the result would definitely be lost in the fog of ignorance. For example, Jiang Wang could now feel the position of the supernatural power seed, which also marked his first inner mansion. That position was extremely far away in the fog of ignorance, and it had nothing to do with the position of the 5 viscera of the human body. To Jiang Wang, it was more like a second beacon outside of the isolated island of heaven and earth, which could prevent Jiang Wang from getting lost in the fog of ignorance. The process of cultivators exploring the Sea of Torso was to drive the soaring dragon Taoist vein and explore this world in the fog of ignorance. This world seemed to be boundless, but it actually had a limit. It was definitely not a day's work. This was because the soaring dragon Taoist vein could only last for a limited time in the fog of ignorance, and it varied according to the strength of the heavenly connecting palace. Cultivators had to return to the isolated island of heaven and earth before the soaring dragon Taoist vein could not last any longer. Otherwise, once the soaring dragon Taoist vein was completely worn out by the fog of ignorance, the result would be death. The isolated island of heaven and earth was such an important base camp, and it also needed a huge amount of Tao energy to support it. Otherwise, it would gradually sink into the sea. Therefore, although soaring dragon realm cultivators could take in and spit out a huge amount of Tao energy, the amount of Tao energy they could use would not increase much compared to heavenly connecting realm cultivators. This was because they had to use a lot of Tao energy to support the isolated island of heaven and earth. When cultivators explored the 5 prefectures sea, they had to remember the route and not get lost. They also had to measure themselves and could not force themselves. In short, it was a very dangerous process. It was more dangerous than any realm before opening the gate of heaven and earth. There was the risk of death at any time, and one might die silently during one's cultivation. The cultivation world had developed to this day. Cultivators had also invented countless methods to ensure the safety of exploration in the fog of ignorance. However, no matter which method it was not as useful as a stable beacon. Therefore, cultivators who could sense the supernatural power seed while still in the soaring dragon realm were often regarded as geniuses. It was not only because the supernatural power could be expected, it was also because these cultivators could enter the inner mansion with relative ease. Of course, it was only a beacon now. When Jiang Wang finished exploring the 5 prefectures sea and knocked on the door of the inner mansion, it was a supernatural power. Chapter 3:12. Chongxian Chu Yang refused to surrender 3 times, so Yang Jinda had no choice but to send troops and order the whole country to save the king. In terms of public opinion, the Yang country sending troops to suppress the army that trapped the country was reasonable and righteous. But at the same time, in order to maintain order in the eastern region, the state of Qi sent troops to seal off the plague so that it could not continue to spread. This also made sense, especially since the Yang country belonged to Qi. In terms of etiquette, the Yang country could be considered Qi territory. Furthermore, Chongxian Chu Yang did indeed only target the plague on the surface and did not invade a single inch of the Yang country. If they were attacked by the Yang army, it was reasonable for them to counterattack. This meant that in terms of public opinion, which was the only advantage that the Yang country had, Chongxian Chu Yang's stability meant that Qi and Yang were on the same starting point. Yang Jinda had already lost in the first round of the head-on battle between the 2 former comrades. The moment he decided to send troops, he had lost the chance to gain sympathy from the public opinion. However, this was a choice that he had no choice. He was still limited by the current situation, but it did not mean that Yang Jinda was weaker than Chongxian Chu Yang. It was just that the trump cards in their hands were too far apart. Although public opinion had its meaning, most of the time, it could not decide the direction of the war. If Yang Jinda could defeat Chongxian Chu Yang, there would be a chance for diplomacy. If not, then everything would be over. After many years of peace, war suddenly broke out. The entire Yang country's army gathered in the imperial capital. Yang Jinda had to worship his ancestors at the imperial ancestral temple before personally leading the troops to fight against Cheng Gongsheng at the border. The 3 prefectures of the Yang country were Hingyang, Rizhao, and Redtail. Hingyang Prefecture was where the imperial capital was located. Needless to say, almost all of the soldiers were mobilized, gathering 150,000 troops in a day. 50,000 of them were the army that protected the capital, while the other 100,000 were the soldiers from the various cities. However, in Redtail Prefecture, the various cities did not react so positively. They gathered 50,000 soldiers and rushed to the imperial capital. What was worth mentioning was that 20,000 of them were volunteer soldiers who brought their own equipment and food. At least 10,000 volunteers came from Tsangfeng City. When it came to Rizhao Prefecture, the enthusiasm was even lower. The first reason was, of course, the mutated plague that was wreaking havoc in the Yang Kingdom. With hundreds of thousands of soldiers gathered together, the evil energy was more than enough to disperse the evil energy like the plague. The soldiers themselves would not be infected by the plague, but the people of the Yang Kingdom still did not have a proper strategy to protect them. Every soldier was a person of flesh and blood. They all had their own family and friends. Of course, it could be said to be great to have the country first and the home second, but it was human nature to have the home first and the country second. Some donated their entire family to the country, while others closed their doors to avoid disaster. Everyone was different. However, The real reason was that the Yang court's governance had been chaotic for so many years, and they had no interest in the people's livelihood. Yang Jinda devoted himself wholeheartedly to cultivation and ignored state affairs. On the other hand, the dead crown Prince Yang Xuanji only cared about seizing power and suppressing his brothers. He was also very perfunctory when it came to state affairs. In the plague that White Bone Path had brewed this time, Yang Court's administrative inefficiency and incompetence were fully exposed. It could be said that they had long lost the hearts of the people. Of course, in Rizhao Prefecture, it was more due to Governor Song Wang's personal reasons. Long before Yang Jinda issued the order to save the emperor, he had already made a move to gather troops and food. Although the new lord of Jia City, Shi Jing, had died, Song Wang had gathered 80,000 soldiers from the remaining 6 cities in the prefecture. Under his relentless plundering, the amount of money and food was uncountable. However, he only sent 10,000 old, weak, sick, and disabled people to Zhaoying City. Due to the special terrain of Chun Rizhao Prefecture, Qi wanted to preserve his strength to protect the emperor. In reality, he was gathering troops for himself and waiting for the right price. His report made Yang Jinda so angry that he laughed. On the dragon throne, the 27th emperor of the Yang Kingdom held the report and said disappointedly, "Who would have thought that after a few hundred years of establishing the Yang Kingdom, after gathering all the officials, in just a few generations, we have lost all hope?" Lu Huai consoled him. At least in Hingyang Prefecture, where the capital is located, the imperial court still has the hearts of the people. Gathering 100,000 soldiers, they have already turned out in full force. Yang Jinda shook his head. Under my breath, facing the sword, they don't dare to not come. How many of them are truly sincere in donating to the country? There are many righteous people who destroyed their homes to repay your kindness. What kindness can I have for them? It's just that they love their home. Yang Jinda tossed the report in his hand aside. No need to console me. I am not so weak as to not be able to face reality. I just want to... He sighed. The hearts of the people are so weak. Furthermore, Qi is so strong and has always been majestic. Although this battle is in our country, we can't hold it for long and need to end it quickly. If there is even the slightest bit of loss in the battle, the mountains will collapse in an instant. He was someone who knew the troops well and had considered all the war matters in his heart. Lu Huai bowed. Your Majesty, you have the heart. Oh, right. Yang Jinda suddenly thought of something and asked. This time, apart from the city protection army, Songfeng City also sent 10,000 troops. Yes, Yang Jinda nodded. Songfeng City has always been a place with plenty of food and people. As he said this, he hesitated. Why do I seem to have a different impression of Songfeng City? Lu Huai knew that cultivating the emotionless blood demon technique had caused Yang Jinda to slowly lose his human emotions. Today, he was so angry at Song Wang that he laughed and sighed for the country. This was already a rare display of emotions. He thought about it and reminded him, the Little Prince's World Tower is built there. World Tower? It's that assassin organization. Oh, it's a matter where I scolded him. Is it still there? The palace treasury didn't allocate any money. It's all the Little Prince's own money. Then this time, that Songfeng City army. I think he's also hidden in the army? It should be. The hall was silent for a while. Lu Huai, I am here. Go find Xuanzi and bring him away. I will arrange it now. It's not an arrangement. Yang Jinda looked up at him. You have to go personally. Your Majesty. Lu Huai suddenly knelt in front of Yang Jinda. Your Majesty, please choose someone else. I really don't want to leave at this time. Yang Jinda said faintly. The building is about to collapse. In this gloomy palace, who can I trust? He reached out and patted Lu Huai's shoulder. Dog slave, I'm going to die. You have to let me have no worries. Do you understand? Lu Huai said with tears, I accept your order. Oh. Yang Jinda seemed to be talking to himself. I should leave something for him. At this moment, Emotions seemed to resist the erosion of the emotionless blood demon technique. There was a trace of imperceptible softness in his eyes. Lu Huai knelt on the ground and just cried. Yang Jinda reached out and opened the imperial box. He patted and stroked the imperial jade seal in the box. In the end, he put it down. He took off the coiling dragon jade pendant from his waist and put it in Lu Huai's hand. Compared to the imperial jade seal, this jade pendant was exquisite, but it didn't have any power or sacred meaning. It was really much more ordinary. But Lu Huai could understand why Yang Jinda only left this jade pendant for Yang Xuanzi. It was because the imperial jade seal would attract endless pursuit for Yang Xuanzi. No one would care about this jade pendant. This jade pendant didn't have any other meaning. It was just a remembrance left by a father for his son. Does your majesty have any words for the young prince? Lu Huai asked with tears in his eyes. Yang Jinda leaned back on the dragon throne as if he was very tired. He waved his hand, indicating that there was no need to say anything. Lu Huai took the coiling dragon jade pendant and hurried out of the hall, leaving the palace without anything else. Yang Jinda sat alone in the hall and was silent for a very long time. Then, as if he suddenly thought of something, he said, "Say sorry to Xuanzi." After saying this, he realized that Lu Huai had already left. Forget it. Chapter 313. Yang Jinda gathered 210,000 troops to fight against Chongxian Chu Liang's 100,000 Xiu offense army. He did not try to hide this from anyone, and it was impossible to hide it from them. Everyone knew that Zhongshuan and Chu Liang had stationed their troops outside the borders of the Yang country to wait for Yang Jinda to lead his troops to attack. However, Zhongshuan Chu Liang still represented the state of Qi and sent 9 letters of credence in a row to persuade Yang Jinda to calm down. He also said that the two countries were like father and son, and that they should not fight and become the laughingstock of the world. Even if it was a misunderstanding, the people of Yang would still be enraged by the contents of the letter, not to mention that both sides knew that a war was inevitable. Anyways, after the Yang army gathered, they formed into a formation and charged toward the border of the two countries. The last time, Chongxian Chu Liang only sent over a broken halberd. His intentions were obvious. A country war that would attract the attention of the entire East region was about to start. The border between Qi and Yang was Rizhao and Qiwei and Yang, and Dingyao and Pingxi and Qi, respectively. Southeast of Rizhao Prefecture was Dingyao Prefecture, northwest of Qi. At the same time, a part of it was Qi Pingxi Prefecture. Probably because of Rizhao Prefecture Governor Song Wang's attitude, Yang Jinda did not go through Rizhao Prefecture. Instead, he planned to go through Redtail Prefecture. From the map, the entire Redtail Prefecture was wide at the top and narrow at the bottom, like the tail of a country. As for its tail, it was touching the lower half of Pingxi County in the state of Qi. Of course, in truth, Chongxian Chu Liang's tent was also outside Pingxi Prefecture. Hence, Redtail Prefecture had become the focus of the world. When the plague was rampant, the White Bone Pass Holy Lord was hiding somewhere in Redtail County. However, Qi and Yang seemed to know nothing about this matter. Or rather, they both ignored it. After killing Shijing and taking in 4,000 city protection troops, Jiajia City had become the strongest city protection army in the world. Qingyang Town had already become the strongest power in Jia City, and because of their active resistance against the plague, they had basically cleared out the plague in the town before the plague mutated. Although the mutated plague was even more terrifying, it was firmly isolated by Jiang Wang's thunderous methods. He beheaded all those who entered Qingyang Town without inspection. Because they had enough resources and regularly provided aid to the surrounding towns, Qingyang Town had already replaced Jia City's city lord's office to a certain extent, becoming the center of Jia City. Perhaps it was because he was afraid of the Zhonggenjia, or perhaps he was busy plundering. But after Shi Jing's death, the Rizhao prefectural governor, Song Wang, did not have any reaction. But on this day, Jiang Wang saw Cheng Gongsheng again. He still came empty-handed, only bringing 14 people with him. The great battle had already begun, and this time, the entering sun cultivators did not violate military orders. "Why are you here at this time?" In the room, Jiang Wang asked first. 14, wearing a black helmet and black armor, stood by the door with an unapproachable aura, preventing anyone from eavesdropping on their conversation. The people of Qingyang town all knew that Cheng Gongsheng and Jiang Wang were friends. Although they were curious, they did not express anything. Only Xiao Xiao, intentionally or otherwise, walked in a few circles, hiding her dissatisfaction well in her heart. She felt that Cheng Gongsheng's subordinates blocking the door had somewhat offended Jiang Wang's authority. As for whether or not Jiang Wang was Cheng Gongsheng's retainer, or whether 14 himself was not ordinary, these were not within her scope of consideration. Of course, limited by her strength, she could only hide her dissatisfaction. Inside the room, Cheng Gongsheng swallowed 2 fruits, wiped his mouth, and asked, "Do you know why Yang Jinda first gathered his troops outside Jiaoying City and then sent them to the front lines?" He probably understood that Jiang Wang would not support him, so he answered himself. First of all, there's a problem with his control over Redtail County and Rizhao County. He cannot control any accidents by gathering troops in these 2 counties. Cheng Gongsheng said, but the most important reason is that whether it is Redtail County or Rizhao County, there is no danger to defend. He gathered his troops in Hengyang County to wait for our army to march straight in. First, he delayed our supplies, and second, he used his territory to divide our army. But the commander has not moved, causing his plan to fight in front of Yunwu City to fail. In the army, he only called the commander, not uncle. Hearing this, Jiang Wang also nodded. Because of the mutated virus, time is on our side. If the commander does not move, then Yang Jinda can only move. Now he has no choice but to send troops out of Hengyang County to fight his way to the front lines through Redtail County. But the country's border is not a suitable battlefield, and there is not enough strategic space outside Pingxi County. Therefore, the commander also intends to enter Redtail County. In other words, Redtail County is the battlefield. Jiang Wang understood, but did not know what he was up to. So, Cheng Gongsheng laughed and kept him in suspense. "Do you know why Yang Jinda's army did not go to Rizhao County?" Jiang Wang said unpleasantly. The Rizhao County chief's attitude is ambiguous. How could he go to Rizhao County? Yes, Song Guang has 70,000 combat soldiers. He did not surrender to Qi, nor did he obey the Yang King's order. It seems like he wants to be a spectator in Rizhao County and wait for a high price. What does he want? Jiang Wang was curious. Zheng Genjia should not be short of money, and she should not be short of money either. Cheng Gongsheng said, "The survival of the Yang Kingdom depends on this battle, and Yang Jinda is not short of money either." Jiang Wang could roughly understand. She was richer, but Yang Jinda was more willing to give up on his country when it was about to fall. In other words, it was not that she could not offer an overwhelming price, but that the price would be extremely high and might not be worth it. Yang Jinda is wary of Song Guang, but so is the general. If the 2 armies fight in Redtail County, how can we allow Song Guang to be a spectator in Rizhao County? Jiang Wang frowned. You mean, Song Guang being a spectator might be a trap set by Yang Jinda? He looks like he is waiting for a high price, but in reality, he might be waiting for the battle in Redtail County to ambush us? Maybe, maybe not. But we can't and dare not deny this possibility. If that's the case, then even if Song Guang surrenders during the battle, he cannot be trusted. Yes, if he wants to surrender, he can only do it before the battle starts. He has to be the vanguard and attack Yang Jinda's army first. If not, the general will not be at ease. But judging from the current situation, he probably won't agree. So what does the general plan to do? Jiang Wang asked. Cheng Gongsheng narrowed his eyes and said, "I have already requested to personally negotiate the terms of surrender with him as the Zheng Genjia's son and the vice-domain chief of the Qiu offense army." Under the Qiu offense army, there were 8 generals. Below the major general was the deputy general, followed by the major general and vice major general. Cheng Gongsheng's current position in the army was vice domain chief. Although he did not have any military achievements, with the Zheng Genji's background, being a vice domain chief was not a high position. In fact, it was quite low profile. It was probably because he wanted to help Chong Xian and Chu Liang avoid suspicion. "This is very dangerous," Jiang Wang said. If Song Guang was really loyal to Yang Jinda from the start, then it was very likely that he wouldn't even give Zhong Xiansheng a chance to speak and would directly kill him. He might even use his identity as the Zheng Genji's son to negotiate with Chong Xian and Chu Liang with his life. If Chong Xian and Chu Liang did not accept, Cheng Gongsheng would definitely die. If Chong Xian and Chu Liang accepted, Cheng Gongsheng's political career would be over. Hence, if Jiang Wang said it was dangerous, then it was really dangerous. However, Cheng Gongsheng only said, "Wealth comes from danger." Chapter 314. This is not the first time you've risked everything. Jiang Wang tried to persuade him. "You can't always have good luck. I put everything I have into this war against the Yang country. It's either I succeed or I die trying. I have no choice now." There was a hint of bitterness in Zhong Xiansheng's voice, which was easy to overlook. When you get to know Zhong Xianzun, you will understand. "If I don't do this, I won't stand a chance at all." With General Chongshuan's military skills and the strength of the Qiu offense army, it shouldn't be a problem to treat Song Guang as an enemy and fight him together with Yang Jinda, right? Jiang Wang asked. "That's why I volunteered," Cheng Gongsheng said. "Destroying the Yang country is the general's achievement. Neutralizing the threat of these 70,000 soldiers could be considered my achievement. I really need it." After a moment of silence, Jiang Wang asked, "Are you confident?" "I wasn't at first, but when I thought of you, I'm confident. That's why I'm here to invite you," Cheng Gongsheng said meaningfully. "Since we're sincere about cooperating, how can you not apologize for killing his concubine's adopted son?" Cheng Gongsheng did not say it explicitly, but Jiang Wang understood what he meant. The so-called negotiation was not a negotiation. Song Guang was using the negotiation as an excuse to assassinate Song Guang. If they could kill Song Guang on the spot, Rizhao County would have no leader and the threat would disappear. However, Song Guang was an experienced intermansion realm cultivator and had 70,000 soldiers under his command. If the two sides faced each other, he only needed to spread out the grand formation, and he could crush Zhong Xiansheng and Jiang Wang in a single move. During this battle, Song Guang would not let his guard down. His 70,000 soldiers were camped outside the county capital. With his intermansion realm cultivation, he could arrive in a few breaths, even if it was an assassination attempt and a sudden attack in the county manor. However, with Song Guang's cultivation, as long as he revealed the slightest gap, he would be able to lead the army to counterattack. At that time, they wouldn't even be able to escape. This did not even take into account the other experts in the county manor. Jiang Wang had many reasons to refuse, and he was completely justified. For example, Song Guang was an intermansion realm martial artist, while the two of them were merely in the soaring dragon realm. For example, he had just pushed open the heaven and earth door and was far from reaching the peak of the soaring dragon realm. Furthermore, this was a completely avoidable risk. Cheng Gongsheng was too much of a gambler. How could he risk his life like this just for some military merits? But in the end, Jiang Wang only said, "We should apologize to Lord County Governor." In the end, only Cheng Gongsheng, Sure 14, Jiang Wang, and Xiangqian went to the county capital. Against the Rizhao prefectural governor who had 70,000 soldiers, it would be useless no matter how many of them there were. It would be better for the 4 of them to go so that Song Guang would be less vigilant. The 4 of them flew all the way, and none of them had weak Dao energy. They flew directly from Qingyang town to the outskirts of the county capital before landing. Under normal circumstances, Outsiders were not allowed to fly directly within the city. The continuous stretch of the military camp was built not far from the city, and it could be seen at a glance. There were only some daily drills going on in the camp, but it was already filled with a murderous aura. Looking at the military camp, Shung suddenly sighed. As the saying goes, the son of a wealthy family does not need to sit under the awning. It's a pity that Yung Gunzuin is already the son of a wealthy family. I guess I can only be the son of 1,000 pounds. Jiang Wang glanced at his physique and thought deeply. Son of 1,000 pounds, your life is hanging by a thread? Chung Gungsheng laughed out loud and suddenly stopped. I hope this thread is strong enough. Sure 14 did not say a word, and he was also very quiet along the way. He had already sent a letter of greeting in advance, so he did not have to worry about being rejected by Song Wang. As soon as they arrived at the city gate, someone from the county government came to welcome them. This person was the housekeeper of Song Wang's residence, definitely a confidant. He also had the surname Song, which was probably bestowed upon him. The county capital was very peaceful, probably because of the 70,000 fighting soldiers stationed outside the city, which gave the city a sense of security. The group went directly to the county government. For Jiang Wang, this was his second time here. However, Song Wang welcomed him in the guest hall last time, but this time it was in the inner court. This meant that this was a private matter, and those who knew their identities were probably sealed. Sure 14 and Qian Xiang were stopped outside the inner court. Please forgive us, guards cannot enter the inner court, housekeeper Song said apologetically. The older a person was, the more cowardly he became. Song Wang was even stopped by 2 soaring dragon realm guards, which showed how cautious he was. It's okay, Chung Gungsheng said with a smile. You can wait outside. Jiang Wang also nodded to Qian Xiang. If Qian Xiang did not set up the sword formation in advance, he would not be able to display the killing power of an intermansion realm cultivator. It was better to let him guard outside. If necessary, he and Sure 14 could intercept the reinforcements from the other experts of the Sunshine County government. Sure 14 and Qian Xiang did not say a word and were led to rest by the servants of the county government. Jiang Wang and Chung Gungsheng followed housekeeper Song into the inner court. When they entered the inner court, they felt that there was a completely different world in here. The inner court was deep and spacious, and the decorations were very elegant. Jiang Wang thought that a greedy person like Song Wang would at least live in a place with gold bricks and jade walls. Now that he saw it, it was quite elegant. It could be seen that elegant was also something that could be bought with money, so it was not a big deal. Even if he did not know how to decorate, he could spend money to hire someone who knew how to decorate. Housekeeper Song led the way in front. His footsteps were light, and his steps were silent. He was also a transcendent cultivator, but his strength was definitely not above the soaring dragon realm. After passing through a few corridors, Song Wang was waiting for them in his tea room. 2 groups of guards stood outside the door, looking straight ahead. Jiang Wang noticed that they were all in the heavenly ascension realm. After moving the wooden door, the elegantly decorated tea room appeared in front of Jiang Wang and Sure 14. Song Wang was sitting across a long wooden table. Next to him was a coquettish woman with heavy makeup. The moment this woman with heavy makeup sat down, the elegant atmosphere of the tea room disappeared. Chung Gungsheng's eyes had a hint of mockery, but his face was full of smiles, and it did not show. Housekeeper Song entered the tea room, knelt at the side, and ordered tea for them. There was only one praying mat opposite Song Wang. Obviously, there was no space left for Jiang Wang. Jiang Wang did not mind and sat on the ground casually. Chung Gungsheng used his leg to push the praying mat aside and sat on the ground. Song Wang noticed this scene, but he did not say anything. The situation now was completely different from when he first met Jiang Wang. At that time, although he was also the head of a county, he still maintained the necessary respect for the Zhenggenjia of Dachi. In other words, he still respected the Zhenggenjia's financial aid. Now that he had 70,000 soldiers in his hands, no matter which side it was, they would try to rope him in. He didn't even care about the donations anymore. After sitting down, Chung Gungsheng breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "Sorry, I'm too fat." You're a rich man. Song Guang raised his hand with a smile. Please have some tea. Chapter 315. At the same time, two teams of transcendent being guards were guarding outside the tea room. After housekeeper Song poured the tea, he knelt at the side. Song Guang sat cross-legged calmly while the young woman leaned on the side. Jiang Wang and Cheng Gung Sheng sat cross-legged on the ground opposite him. Cheng Gung Sheng took a sip of tea and praised housekeeper Song. The tea is good. Then he looked at Song Guang and said, County Chief Song, the situation in Redtail County is imminent. We need to come up with a plan as soon as possible. Don't panic. Song Guang waved his hand. His hand was thin like an old man's, but his joints were thick and strong. He deliberately shifted his gaze and looked at Jiang Wang. I remember you. Yes, Jiang Wang said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Jiang Wang came to visit you because of the plague. At this time, the woman next to Song Guang screamed, Are you Jiang Wang? Jiang Wang frowned. Then, she continued to scream, Are you the one who killed my godson? It turned out that this was Song Guang's fourth concubine. Shi Jing, who died in Qingyang town, recognized her as his godson and got on Song Guang's boat. Judging from the woman's attitude, she was obviously favored by Song Guang. Jiang Wang ignored her and said to Song Guang, I'm here to apologize to you. Apologize? What's the use of apologizing? Can a dead person come back to life? The woman screamed again. Song Guang patted the woman's hand gently to calm her down. Then, he looked at Jiang Wang. When you came to visit me last time, did I ever disrespect you? Of course, there was disrespect, but Jiang Wang could only say, no. Song Guang asked again, Is there any enmity between you and me? Jiang Wang shook his head, no. Song Guang asked again, Then, is there any enmity between you and my wife? Jiang Wang shook his head again. I don't know her. Song Guang nodded and stopped looking at Jiang Wang. Instead, he turned to Cheng Gung Sheng and said, Child Chong Xian, did you hear that? This meant that Cheng Gung Sheng had to show his attitude. Cheng Gung Sheng's smile remained unchanged as he looked at the woman. Fourth madam of the Song family, right? The woman snorted to show that she was still angry. What exactly do you want from a godson who is over 50 years old? As Cheng Gung Sheng spoke, his smile gradually disappeared. Do you lack money for his cosmetics? Or does he really have some unknown strengths? Song Guang's face immediately turned cold. Chongxian Gongzi, what do you mean by that? What do I mean? Cheng Gung Sheng raised his voice. Shi Jing is a skeleton in the grave, and you, Song Guang, are a dying old man. I put aside my military affairs and came to negotiate with you personally. I've given you enough face, but you let this be *TCH come out and annoy me. What do you mean by this? The woman was like a chicken that had been grabbed by the neck. She was shocked and angry, but she didn't dare to make sound. She was usually arrogant because Song Guang doted on her. However, she knew very well the way to the family named Chongxian. She could only look at Song Guang with a wronged expression and wait for him to make a decision. Song Guang also felt embarrassed to be pointed at and scolded like this. His expression was very ugly. However, Cheng Gung Sheng was the son of the Zhenggenjia's main branch after all. He did have a right to be arrogant. He suppressed his temper and said in a low voice, I'm very willing to work for the Qi. However, before we agree to work together, I need to see your sincerity. He didn't expect Cheng Gung Sheng and Jiang Wang to come here with such intentions. Both of them were only in the Soaring Dragon realm. This was the biggest cover. He himself was an Intermansion realm expert, and there were two groups of guards outside the tea house. The entire county city was under his control, and there were 70,000 soldiers stationed outside the city. Which assassin would dare to come here and seek death? Moreover, with Cheng Gung Sheng's noble status, how could he take such a risk? In fact, up until now, he only thought that Cheng Gung Sheng was throwing a tantrum. Cheng Gung Sheng looked at him and said softly, The distance between us is less than 10 steps. He had purposely asked his concubine to sit with him and used Shi Jing as an excuse. Perhaps he was looking for trouble, probing, or simply trying to raise the price. However, it didn't matter. Chung Gung-sheng was halfway through his words when he shot up. "This is my sincerity." Chung Gung-sheng was very fat, so it took a lot of strength for him to move. Because of this, he either didn't move, or he would get something in return if he moved. How powerful was Chung Gung-sheng after he opened the door of heaven and earth? At least, Jiang Wang, who once had a chance to compete for the title of the strongest reaching heaven state, had no chance of winning against Chung Gung-sheng. It should be noted that when Jiang Wang was in the reaching heaven state, he could kill ordinary soaring dragon realm experts as easily as killing chickens. When Chung Gung-sheng stood up, he stretched out his hand. An invisible force immediately enveloped Song Wang, who had sensed that something was wrong. What was an inner mansion? A person had 5 mansions, and each of them was like a newly opened Tongtian palace. Although Song Guang hadn't acquired any magical power, he was already an expert in 2 mansions. Together with the Tongtian palace, he had 3 sources of power in his body. The 2 mansions and the Tongtian palace were activated at the same time, filling his body with an endless stream of extraordinary power. But he still couldn't help but draw closer to Chung Gung-sheng. That formless yet incomparably powerful force surged in from all directions. Behind him was a strong repulsive force, and in front of him was a terrifying suction force. It was as if the whole world was rejecting him, squeezing him, and squeezing him into Chung Gung-sheng's hands. Song Guang almost instantly remembered what kind of power it was. It was Chong Xuan's secret skill. It was also the origin of the family named Chongxian. Before opening the door of heaven and earth, Chung Gung-sheng could only add heavy techniques to basic Taoist magic arts. But after opening the door of heaven and earth, he could directly use heavy techniques to fight enemies. This was the bloodline's secret skill that Zheng Genjia relied on to gain a foothold in the world. It was almost equivalent to a magical power. Why were top aristocratic families able to survive for thousands of years? Because they didn't need to acquire magical powers to have a chance to display their fighting power. Song Guang was very clear about the current situation. He knew that his cultivation hadn't improved for many years and was already declining. The reason he was doing his best to plunder was to accumulate wealth and exchange it for natural treasures that would be helpful to him. If he were to fight against Chung Gung-sheng, who had cultivated his bloodline's secret skill to this level, he would definitely be no match. But the guards were outside the gate, and the army was outside the city. As long as he could create a gap, he could turn the tables. And when the 3 power sources couldn't stop his body from moving forward, Song Guang steeled his heart and detonated one of his mansions. Boom! A muffled, thunder-like sound exploded within Song Guang's body, and a violent and enormous power rushed out along with the explosion of one of his inner palaces, helping Song Guang to temporarily break free from the omnipresent gravity. But almost at the same time, Jiang Wang activated his Taoist magic art with a thought. After entering the soaring dragon realm, he had used up all the energy he had accumulated and unsealed the 2nd level of the Taoist platform to derive tiger binding. Thus, he obtained an advanced Taoist magic art, 5 Qi tiger binding, which was already an A-grade Taoist magic art. Song Guang's mansions exploded, and the 5 Qi in his body instantly collapsed. But in the next moment, under the guidance of Jiang Wang, they gathered and formed 5 Qi ropes of the 5 elements. From inside to outside, they bound the exploding Song Guang. This binding only existed for a short moment. But it was at this moment that a cold light shot out of the tea room. Lu. A head fell on the tea table and rolled a few times before stabilizing. Then it was Song Guang's headless corpse. Blood spurted wildly. Chapter 316. Although Song Guang had opened 2 prefectures, he was not as strong as Long Guang, who was at his peak. However, the difficulty of Chung Gung-sheng's mission was to kill Song Guang in the shortest time possible. He could not give him any chance to recover. As the Zheng Genjia's death warrior, Song Guangsheng would definitely be wary of Song Wang. That was why he invited Jiang Wang to travel with him. It was because he had absolute trust in Jiang Wang's strength. Jiang Wang's cooperation was perfect. He did not waste any time and responded to his trust with his strength. Everything happened suddenly and ended abruptly. In the blink of an eye, Song Wang's head rolled off. No matter how many tricks he had up his sleeves, he could not use them all and disappeared into thin air. Housekeeper Song was a soaring dragon realm cultivator, but he didn't even have time to react. He had just stood up, and the battle had already ended. Ah! Song Wang's fourth concubine screamed. At this moment, the two teams of guards outside the tea room burst through the door. Slap! Chung Gung Sheng slapped the woman and sent her flying to the wall. Her screams stopped abruptly, and her body slid down the wall. She was dead. Jiang Wang did not waste any time. After killing Song Wang, he activated the 5-Chi binding tiger again. He turned around and pierced Housekeeper Song's heart with his sword. At this moment, dealing with such a mediocre soaring dragon realm cultivator was as easy as killing a chicken. He kept his sword and formed a seal with one hand. A sea of flame flowers spread out and dragged all the Rizhao prefecture guards into the sea of flames. These guards had to determine their location, investigate the illusory flowers, and guard against the attacks of the real flame flowers. Chung Gung Sheng and Jiang Wang were in the sea of flame flowers, but their vision was unobstructed. Chung Gung Sheng took a big step forward and killed one guard with his palm. Jiang Wang slashed horizontally and killed 2 guards with his sword. In just 5 breaths of time, the sea of flame flowers dissipated and the 2 teams of transcendent guards were killed. At this moment, County Governor Song Wang and Housekeeper Song Wang had been killed. The 2 teams of transcendent guards were also killed. However, the commotion in the tea room had been noticed by the other transcendent cultivators. One after another, transcendent cultivators approached. In the direction of the guest room, a ray of sword light shot up to the sky. The ray of light was extremely sharp. It was the flying sword. After seeing the commotion here, he and 14 must have made a move. In the tea room, Jiang Wang only asked, "How is it?" Zhongshuan Sheng didn't take a detour. He directly broke through the wall and strode out to the barracks outside the city. Although Song Wang was dead, the 70,000 soldiers were still alive. If anyone with any prestige in Qiyang were to come, it would be a disaster. What they needed to do was to take advantage of Song Guangong's death and the fact that the army outside the city was in a daze to break into the camp, kill the generals, and disperse the army on the spot. Song Guang might really want to surrender to Qi, but he was greedy and wanted more. Or maybe he was Yang Jianda's secret weapon. His greedy face was just to blind the eyes of the Qi people so that he could stab them in the back and fight for the Yang kingdom's fate. But that was no longer important. Chongxian and Chu Liang did not need a hidden danger who was hesitant. They could either surrender or die. As for Chung Gung Sheng, there was no need for him to surrender now. Kill their men and disperse their army. Allowing Chongxian and Chu Liang to fight Yang Jinda without any scruples was his only goal, and also his greatest contribution. Now that Song Guang was dead, no one cared what his motives were. There were many experts in Rizhao Prefecture, and transcendent cultivators were constantly attacking. However, Chung Gung Sheng and Jiang Wang rushed out of the tea house one after the other, and then separated into 2 lines. Along the way, regardless of whether it was the Meridian Roaming Realm, Heavenly Cycle Realm, Heavenly Completion Realm, or Soaring Dragon Realm, not a single one of them was a match for him. The sounds of explosions were endless, and the sound of swords did not stop. Not long after, Shi 14 and Fong Chong had also rushed out and separated. The former opened and closed wide, rampaging in all directions, dyeing the black armor in blood. The latter was incomparably sharp, and a flash of sword light could be seen from front to back, killing people without end. Bang, 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 bang. Jiang Wang relied on the speed of the flame meteor to shuttle back and forth, specifically looking for experts who were in charge and killing them one by one. He landed on the ground and spread out a sea of flame flowers, instantly activating the 5 chi binding tiger and piercing the sun and moon with his sword. No one could resist this set of moves. Chung Gung Sheng was even more terrifying. Whenever he saw someone jumping out of line, he would casually grab them and pull them in front of him, killing them with a slap. At this time of the battle, there were many transcendent cultivators in Rizhao Prefecture. What Jiang Wang and Fang Chong wanted to do was to break their backbone, shatter their courage to kill, and beat them into a disorganized mob. No need to chase. Go outside the city. Jiang Wang and Chung Gung Sheng shouted almost at the same time. They left Shi 14 and Fang Chong behind to continue killing, not giving the cultivators of the prefecture a chance to organize and report back. Chung Gung Sheng and Jiang Wang killed their way through the governor's mansion and flew straight to the army camp outside the city. Their actions were so decisive that the governor's mansion was still in chaos, and no one had the time to inform the army camp. Song Guang did not expect to be assassinated while the army was stationed outside the city. No one in the army camp had expected it either. 70,000 soldiers were outside the city, and Song Guang was a cautious person. He was also an intermansion realm expert who had opened 2 prefectures. Under such circumstances, how could a few soaring dragon realm cultivators kill him? Time was needed to send a message, and Jiang Wang and Shi 14 were taking advantage of this time difference. When they arrived outside the army camp, Chung Gung Sheng shouted loudly, "Where's the commander?" "I am Chung Gung Sheng, the son of the main branch of the Zhongenjia, the vice commander of the Qiu Offense Army. I have come to an agreement with Song Guang to personally take over the army." This title was indeed intimidating, and the army camp hesitated for a moment in response to the danger. Immediately, an armored general stood up and faced the 2 of them. "Who are you? Why don't I see the governor himself? Do you have the governor's seal?" Behind him, 5 other generals rose into the air one after another. He was quite cautious, but without saying a word, Jiang Wang had already spread out a sea of flame flowers. Chung Gung Sheng used all his heavy techniques to gather them in one place, while Jiang Wang pierced through with his long sword. Bang! 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 Most of the soldiers in the army camp only saw their general ask a question, and then a sea of flowers bloomed in the air. The sea of flowers scattered, and a few armored corpses fell to the ground one after another. Chung Gung Sheng and Jiang Wang directly killed these generals above the army camp. Shock, then anger. The entire army camp was in an uproar. Transcendent cultivators flew up one after another, shouting, "Set up the formation! Formation!" However, bang, 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 bang. Wherever there were shouts, Jiang Wang's flame meteors would explode there. Under his long sword, there were no survivors. Chung Gung Sheng used heavy techniques to control the situation, either slapping with his palms or smashing with his fists. Simple and violent, he killed the transcendent cultivators in the air one by one. These people flew up one by one, and then fell down one by one like rain. However, every raindrop represented the loss of a life. Simple, direct, cruel, and tragic. For a very long time in the future, this scene would be a nightmare that the soldiers would never be able to get rid of. Chapter 3:17. There was a system in the army, but the 70,000 soldiers that Song Guang gathered were not the strongest in the world. Firstly, Song Guang was already dead, and the army was leaderless. Secondly, it happened so suddenly that the army camp was not prepared. Thirdly, Jiang Wang and Chung Gung Sheng attacked at lightning speed. They first killed the main general, then the generals of the other camps, and directly broke the connection points of the entire army camp. As a result, the camp could not even organize a decent counterattack. Instead, the camp was in chaos, and there was no order. The 70,000 soldiers were in a mess, and they did not know what was going on. Countless voices sounded, but no one knew what to do or where to go. Like ants on a hot pan, they were in a mess and even collided with each other. At that moment, Chung Gung Sheng's voice was activated by his Tao essence, and it rolled across the army camp like thunder, ensuring that everyone could hear it. "The Qi's heavenly soldiers have arrived. Song Wang will be executed." He strode forward in the air, and everywhere he passed, corpses fell. His huge body looked even more terrifying at that moment. "All soldiers, abandon your armor and leave the camp now. I promise in the name of Cheng Xian and in the name of the Qiu Offense Army's deputy commander that I will not pursue your crimes." Jiang Wang used the flame meteor escape technique to kill from one end of the army camp to the other. Everywhere he passed, he killed until everyone was terrified. He shook off the blood on his sword and shouted, "The Yang Lord is immoral, and the county governor is immoral. They have lost the people's trust and offended the heavenly authority. The Yang court will definitely be destroyed when the heavenly soldiers arrive. In the future, the people of the Yang court will be the people of the Qi court. A mere plague and evil cult will be destroyed with a flick of the finger. Why don't you go back to protect your families and observe the situation? Go home," he shouted. Actually, after saying so much, it was not as useful as the last sentence. Going home was the softest wish in every soldier's heart. Clang, clang, clang. Weapons and armor immediately fell to the ground. Once the chaotic soldiers found a direction, they immediately dispersed. Jiang Wang and Cheng Gongsheng shouted as they killed all those who resisted. The splattering blood added weight to their words. Looking down from the sky, countless soldiers in the huge barracks scattered and fled in all directions. They threw away their armors, pushed down their tents, and tore open their antlers. They were like ants that had gathered together, but when disaster struck, they hurriedly scattered. Their fighting spirit collapsed, and panic spread. They scrambled to be the first, each running faster than the other. It was to the extent that many of the soldiers accidentally tripped and were trampled to death. Naturally, not all of the 70,000 men in the army were headless flies, and not all of them were cowards who feared death. In fact, the resistance in the army had never stopped since Jiang Wang killed the first person. The soldiers who formed the battle formation at the first moment were all killed first. But for those brave ones, if they couldn't form a battle formation, they would just charge forward. Those who could fly soared into the air. Those who couldn't fly would go against the flow of people and jump up to fight. Soldiers were constantly being killed, but there were also soldiers constantly charging forward. However, if the entire military camp was compared to a large formation, then all the nodes had been destroyed. These soldiers could only fight for themselves. Whether it was Cheng Gongsheng or Jiang Wang, they were both absolute powerhouses at the Soaring Dragon Realm. Needless to say, Jiang Wang, Cheng Gongsheng, who had been in the Soaring Dragon Realm for a longer time, would only be stronger. It could be said that in the huge Rizhao city, except for the dead Rizhao county chief, no one could fight them head-on. They destroyed the military camp with decisive means and suppressed the scene with powerful strength. The will to fight could not reverse the huge gap in strength. Moreover, in terms of will to fight, Jiang Wang and Cheng Gongsheng, who would lose to them? Heads were rolling all over the place in this massacre. The military camp that stretched for miles was overturned in one day, and there were scattered soldiers everywhere. Faced with this situation, one of the young generals was infuriated. Boom! He actually broke through and opened the door of heaven and earth. To be able to open the door of heaven and earth at such a young age, he was also a talent. And he quickly suppressed the chaotic flow of vitality and controlled the soaring dragon realm, which showed his talent. At this time, when the forces in the air were gradually thinning out, he took off. In the air above countless deserters and scattered soldiers, he went against the flow, showing his courage alone. 70,000 soldiers have taken off their armor, and none of them are men. His angry shout was enough to make any deserter feel ashamed. Holding a battle saber, he was brave and fierce. However, in the next moment, Jiang Wang rushed over like a shooting star. With a sword, he sent him flying along with his saber. Then Cheng Gongsheng pulled with his big hand, pulling the general back from flying. Jiang Wang swept his sword horizontally, and a clear and huge cut appeared on the general's neck. Blood gushed out like a fountain, and he died on the spot, powerless to the ground. It was not that this person needed to be killed by the two of them together, but that both of them wanted to kill him at the first moment. It was just a temporary cooperation. The hero of another, the enemy of mine. The braver the enemy, the sooner he died, the better. On the battlefield, there was no such thing as mutual appreciation and mercy. The more you respected him, the more you wanted to kill him. Outside Rizhao City, the army camp had already collapsed. After this brave young general died in battle, the morale that had been boosted by his charge crumbled even further. There was no turning back. When Qian Xiang and Shi Si finally arrived at the military camp outside the city, all they saw was an empty camp and a ground full of armors. The war between Yang and Qi had not officially started, but the 70,000 soldiers stationed in Rizhao Prefecture had already been driven away by Cheng Gongsheng and Jiang Wan. The 100,000 Qiu offense army had no flanks to worry about. Cheng Xian and Chu Liang could calmly deploy their troops and leave the unfavorable terrain to fight Yang Jian's army. Such a great achievement could directly make Cheng Gongsheng a general, if he was still in the Qiu offense army after the war. None of them are men. Ha ha ha. Cheng Gongsheng laughed among the corpses, but there was no mockery in his laughter. Jiang Wang, he suddenly said, if there comes a day when you and I lose, don't be brave. Don't try to show off your manly courage. Run as far as you can. At this moment, Jiang Wang was sitting cross-legged on top of a military tent that had yet to collapse. Although the Sauvignon long sword was not stained with blood, he was carefully wiping it. Why are you saying this all of a sudden? Cheng Gongsheng squinted his eyes and looked into the distance. My father died on the battlefield because he thought he was a Zheng Genji man. I was still very young then, and I always saw him as a great hero. But as I grew up, why were my resources not as good as his? Why was I not valued? Why was my household always short of money? It was all because he died. Why am I so far behind Yung Genzuan? Even if he is a once-in-a-thousand-years genius, how can I, Cheng Gongsheng, be so far behind him? Why do I have to risk my life and drag all of you into danger again and again? Because I lost my father when I was young. Jiang Wang was speechless. Of course, 14th did not say anything. He stepped on the armor and corpses on the ground and silently walked behind Cheng Gongsheng to protect him. He did not care about anything, so he could not help but feel emotional. At this moment, the entire military camp was filled with the wind of war. Chapter 3:18. Speaking of which, the Yang family's ancestral temple had been worshipped for dozens of generations and had even built a protective array. A protective array that could cover the entire country would require an immeasurable amount of resources. If it wasn't a strong country, it would at least have a rich ancestor. However, the protective array of the Yang country had been broken several times during the turmoil in the eastern region. This also showed the resilience of the Yang country's regime. The protective array was broken several times, but it was repaired several times. However, after Qi established his territory, the Yang country's position became even more awkward, especially after the Yang country became Qi's vassal state. The new emperor had to be conferred by Qi before he could be considered legitimate. Who was this so-called great nation-protecting array guarding against? Would the state of Qi allow such a threat to exist right under their noses? All of these made the Yang country very troubled. This matter was resolved in the end. A knowledgeable official in the Yang court suggested that since Qi and the Yang country were one, why not connect the protective array of the Yang country with Qi? Sharing weal and woe, sharing both glory and fortune. Isn't this the way of long-term stability? No one knew the exact process, but this proposal was successfully passed. This was also the reason why Cheng Xian and Chu Liang could easily trap the Yang country and lead the army to Red Tail County without breaking the protective array. No matter how weak the Yang country was, they couldn't let Qi control their protective array. However, after the two arrays were connected, it was easy for Qi to stop the protective array of the Yang country. In other words, the protective array of the Yang country, which used up a lot of resources, was useless to Qi. What was worth mentioning was that the minister who suggested the Yang Kingdom's national defense array and the Qi Kingdoms combined might had now settled down in the Qi Kingdom with his entire family and had gotten a decent job in the Qi Kingdom. Redtail County is long and narrow. It was named after the tail of the red flame. Now that the Yang country's regime is coming to an end, isn't it God's will? The war horses of the Qiu offense army were mixed with the bloodline of demonic beasts. Therefore, even though Cheng Gengsheng's weight was shocking, the warhorse beneath him was still light and agile. After the massacre in Rizhao Prefecture, Cheng Xian and Chu Liang immediately mobilized the army. Jiang Wang and Cheng Gengsheng joined the army. Qian Xian returned to Qingyang town alone. To him, he was not interested in Qi's achievements and fame. Instead, he wanted to protect Qingyang town. Accompanying Jiang Wang to the Rizhao Prefecture was not only because he supported Jiang Wang, but also because he hated the Songguang rebels. Although Qingyang town had a system, it still needed such a strong person to suppress accidents. Merits were the most important in the military. Cheng Gengsheng personally went to Rizhao Prefecture to negotiate and killed Songguang, the governor of Rizhao Prefecture. After that, he went straight to the barracks and defeated the 70,000 soldiers. Such a meritorious deed instantly gave him enough authority to speak in the Qiu offense army. He arranged for Jiang Wang to follow the army in the name of an advisor, and no one dared to say anything. At this moment, he was in high spirits, and many of the generals around him agreed. Cheng Xian and Chu Liang also rode on their war horses and moved forward with the vast army. Hearing this, he only said, "Don't underestimate Yang Jinda. The dust has not settled yet. If you lose because of your carelessness, don't blame me for being merciless." Cheng Gengsheng changed his arrogance and obediently bowed on the back of his horse. Yes, Yang Jinda led the 210,000 soldiers from the west to the east. Cheng Xian and Chu Liang personally led the 100,000 Qiu offense army from the east to the west. The Qi army also had many auxiliary soldiers who worked together with the formation to lock down the entire Yang country. However, they would not participate in the final battle. In the entire Yang country, the Qi army was like a huge cage that trapped the Yang country, and the Qiu offense army was the lock of the cage. Yang Jinda led the army to break the lock. It was not difficult to charge out from either side of the cage, but it was pointless. And Cheng Xian and Chu Liang's advance was like a hand reaching in from outside the cage to capture the prey in the cage. Either Cheng Xian and Chu Liang captured the prey and returned with a full load, or Yang Jinda broke this hand and broke the cage. Redtail County was the battlefield chosen by both sides. However, the similarity was that both sides were very cautious. On the surface, each side had their own reasons. Yang country's military had been lax for a long time, and Yang Jinda had given up power for many years. Now, through killing the crown prince and a series of other actions, he had regained control of the military. Not to mention the administration, he needed to slowly move forward to familiarize himself with and control the army. It could be said that he was being cautious, or it could be said that he was sharpening his spear at the last minute. Yang country could not afford to drag this out, so Yang Jinda sent his troops out of Hengyang County. However, when he could not afford to drag this out before the final battle, he forcefully dragged it out. Cheng Gengsheng would not fail to understand this, and Cheng Xian and Chu Liang were not as lacking in confidence. Their conversation was just to suppress the arrogance in the army. The Qiu offense army was one of the 9 soldiers of Qi, and they had been famous for a long time. They would not treat the Yang army as an equal opponent, especially when Cheng Gengsheng did not bring a single soldier to disperse the 70,000 soldiers stationed in Rizhao County. This made the Qiu offense army especially disdainful of the Yang army. However, due to Chongqian and Chu Liang's strict management of the army, they did not dare to show their arrogance. In the entire army, only Cheng Gongsheng could show his arrogance because of his great contributions. This was a good opportunity to teach Chongqian and Chu Liang a lesson to correct the attitude of the army. The Qiu offense army's progress was slow because Chongqian and Chu Liang had changed their style of using troops. The entire army seemed to be destroying cities and fortresses along the way, wiping out all resistance, collecting surrendered soldiers, checking for the plague, and crushing everything inch by inch. Every step was careful, completely different from the few battles that made him famous. Intentionally or unintentionally, in the space between the two armies that was gradually shrinking, some kind of change was happening. The sacred lord of the White Bone Path, who came from Zhuang country, was still frantically absorbing the plague gas. In the empty space in the forest, he was floating in mid-air. From all directions, a tangible but immaterial force kept surging into this place. The pale white smoke seemed to have solidified, making this place look like a desolate and dangerous place. Occasionally, when the smoke fluctuated greatly, one could clearly see the sacred lord of the White Bone Path. He was completely naked. His body, which could be considered skinny, seemed to have something swimming under his skin. His skin bulged and flattened, repeating this process over and over again. Sometimes one could see his bones twisting strangely, and even the white bones pierced out of his skin and flesh. However, they quickly shrank back and were covered again. His body seemed to be mutating and reorganizing in some way. Only his face remained expressionless. In contrast, he looked especially ferocious and terrifying. Heaven and earth were like a furnace. The plague gas was like fire, and his body was like a pill. In the pale white smoke, there was always a singing voice. It was faintly discernible, and it seemed to be intermittent. If one listened carefully, the singing voice was singing, "Heaven and earth are heartless. The king's kindness is unrequited. The kindness of his family does not exist, and the kindness of his master becomes enmity. The 5 relationships are impermanent, and the 7 emotions are destroyed. Stepping on my door of life and death, wearing my black and white scarf, killing my old intentions, sending me to my death." The survivors of Maplewood City would probably never forget it. It was the Song of White Bones. P.S. The following does not count. I wrote so much that my heart was surging. Unfortunately, there were very few people who saw this scene with me. There was a kind of loneliness of a sword that carried the benefits of the world. Let's do an update measure. Let's limit it to next week to test the water. It's not only to guide the enthusiasm of the readers, but also to force me to work harder. First of all, the Alliance leader will add one update, which will be fixed in the future. Then, the most important thing about the novel is the subscription, which is related to whether the editor will recommend and various website resources. Chapter 319. The entire royal bloodline of the Yang country was killed by Yang Jianda, who cultivated the Blood Devil Codex. In the past, there was still some concealment. The death of the Yang royal family was claimed to be due to illness. After killing Crown Prince Yang Xuanji in the main hall, Yang Jianda did not even bother to find a reason. He summoned his blood relatives to the palace and killed them all. The Blood Devil Codex was his secret weapon. Hence, it was important to keep it a secret. In order to achieve this goal, all the officials, maids, and eunuchs who witnessed this were killed by Yang Jianda, except for a few who could be trusted. Hence, this matter was hidden in the palace and did not spread. To the outside world, it was claimed that these people wanted to make peace with Qi because their legs were weak and their hearts were weak. Yang Jianda, on the other hand, killed them all to strengthen his resolve. He even decreed that anyone who wanted to make peace, from the commoners to the royal family, would be punished as traitors. Killing Crown Prince Yang Xuanji was Yang Jianda's stance. Even the Crown Prince was killed. No one in the Yang country dared to make peace. There was only one voice in the country. The upper echelons of the military were mostly old subordinates who had followed Yang Jianda to war. He had let go of his political power, but not his military power. When Crown Prince Yang Xuanji wanted to force Yang Jianda to abdicate, he borrowed the power of the imperial court and did not even think about the military. If it was just going from unfamiliar to familiar, this process shouldn't take too long. However, Yang Jianda led his 210,000 troops and moved as slowly as he could. It was as if he was competing with Cheng Xian and Chu Liang in building barracks instead of a life-and-death battle. Outsiders might not understand, but those old subordinates would not doubt Yang Jianda's military power. Many people were confused. Yang Jianda's tent was very ordinary. It did not have the usual extravagance of the Yang royal family. Only the crimson sun dragon flag outside the tent showed his identity as the king. At this moment, a muscular middle-aged general said, "You washed the imperial court in blood and killed the crown prince to show your determination for war. Now we are a mourning army. We can use morale to fight." "General, why are you here?" Another young general said, "The Chi Thief army has already entered Red Tail. The terrain is in our favor. The longer we delay, the more familiar the Chi army will be with the geography. Our advantage is disappearing. Your Majesty, you must reconsider." In the past, Yang Jianda still addressed his former subordinates as general, out of habit and also to show his loyalty. As for the younger generation of generals in the army, they were still addressed as Your Majesty. Just from the way they addressed each other, it could be seen that the qualifications of the two groups of generals were different. However, both the old and young generals had the same judgment about the situation. They all thought that if the Yang Kingdom's army wanted to win, they would have to do it quickly before the Chiu offense army gained a firm foothold. The entire Yang Kingdom was already at war, but she had only sent out one of its 9 soldiers. The Yang Kingdom had already given their all, but she had a steady supply of reinforcements. If the situation dragged on, it would not benefit the Yang Kingdom at all. Yang Jianda sat high up in the commander's seat, observing his subordinates and listening attentively to the suggestions of each and every one of them. He didn't miss anyone's gaze. Finally, he opened his mouth and said, "How could I not know what the generals are saying? But how could Cheng Xian and Chu Liang not know? If the Qi army invades like fire, our army can meet them head-on. If we are determined to die together, we may have a chance of winning. However, I have to say something cruel here. I am not trying to boost the morale of others and diminish our own." Yang Jianda placed his hands on his knees and stared at his generals. "Let me ask you all, if we fight the Chiu offense army head-on, what are our chances of winning?" A white-haired old general with deep wrinkles on his face stood up, swaying for a moment, but he still said, "The Chiu offense army is the strongest army in the world. If we fight 10 against 1, we still have a 30% chance of winning. If we fight 2 against 1, our chances of winning are 1 in 100. His surname was Ji, and his name was Cheng. He had been a famous general for many generations, and could be considered the #1 general family in the Yang Kingdom. Unfortunately, the Ji family had already lost many talents. He had 2 sons and 3 grandsons, all of whom had died in battle. Now, the only man left in the Ji family was this old general. The old general was heroic, but how could he not be sorrowful? His voice was trembling. After he finished speaking, he closed his eyes, as if he was unwilling to face the cruel reality of the disparity in power between the 2 armies. But as the general of the army, he had to face it. "Yes, there is only 1 in 100. Yang Jianda first repeated in a low voice, then said, "But why did you still lead your army here? Why are you still gathered in front of our camp? Our 210,000, let's call ourselves a weak army. Why are these 210,000 weak army gathered here? Why do you dare to fight the Chiu offense army head-on?" He stood up from his seat and faced all the generals. "Our Yang family's ancestral temple has been worshipped for 27 generations. It is not the people of the Yang Kingdom who owe us. It is the Yang Kingdom who owes the world. But if I am killed alone, Can weapons stop me? Can the greed of the Qi people be satisfied? Can you be at ease? Can the people of the Yang Kingdom be at peace? The Yang Kingdom does not belong to the Yang family alone. It belongs to all the people of the Yang Kingdom who live on this land. The Qi people have betrayed us, invaded our homeland, and killed our people. I, Yang Jinda, do not regret my death. But why should the people of the Yang Kingdom lose their country and not be able to return to being the people of the Yang Kingdom? Everyone was silent. The group of men in the army could only hold their weapons tightly, unable to say a single word. Everyone, we are gathered here, armed with swords, for the same purpose. Yang Jinda pounded his chest with his fist. My heart is with all of you. My desire for victory is no less than yours. But the more it is so, the more cautious we must be, because we only have the strength for one battle. Ahead of us is an abyss. If we cannot win this battle, there will be no chance for us to rise again. The Yang Kingdom is facing a crisis it has not faced in hundreds of years. If we lose this battle, I will die. But what about you? You have been people of the Yang Kingdom for half your life. Now that you are old, can you adapt to the life of the Qi people? After Yang Jinda asked this question, he looked around until he made eye contact with everyone. After confirming that he had transmitted his spiritual will to them, he returned to the military strategy. I only value Xian Shuliang's meticulous planning, stopping every 10 li wherever he goes. He either imprisons or kills people. We know that he is prepared for a quick battle. He is a famous general. Since he is prepared, we must not rush. But general, what is our chance of victory? It was still the white-haired old general, Ji Chung. He trembled as he asked, if we fight force with force, what is our chance of victory? Wait, Yang Jinda said. I surrender as the leader of the Yang Kingdom. Then I station my troops in front of Zhaoheng City. We are all waiting for Chongxian Chuliang to make a mistake. But he has not made a single mistake. Every step he takes is stable. Those who are good at using surprise troops will be mediocre if they lose, and famous if they win. Those who can use proper troops will be famous in the world. His use of troops is already the best in the world. Facing such an opponent, Yang Jinda clenched his fists. There was no fear in his eyes. There was only a burning desire for battle. My blood is boiling. I am waiting for a variable. This variable does not depend on us. And because of this, we will not be calculated by Chongxian Chuliang. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.